The Metropolitan Police Force in London is plunged into crisis as an armed officer is revealed to be one of the country's worst serial rapists.
A very good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 17th of January. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GBNews with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news on this Tuesday morning, the Metropolitan Police is facing calls for urgent reform after one of its officers pleaded guilty to committing more than 70 sex attacks over 18 years, including 24 rapes.
Teachers will strike in England and Wales from the 1st of February, according to the National Education Union. The walkouts will mean GCSE pupils will have just had 1 year of uninterrupted learning.
The Prime Minister has blocked Scotland's controversial gender recognition bill, with First Minister Nicola Sturgeon calling it a full frontal attack on the Scottish Parliament. The move by the government represents the first time Scottish legislation has been stopped by Westminster.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have accused Jeremy Clarkson of hate rhetoric. It comes after the TV personality issued a second public apology for a column he wrote about hating Meghan Markle.
You see, there's a word that's very out of vogue now, hate. People say, oh, hate's a very strong word. I wouldn't use the word hate. Well, many people would use the word hate, but they don't mean it with the way it has become. I think it's a toxic word now, so you sort of can't say it.
Yeah.
You can dislike someone or you can be mildly irritated by someone.
But hate is a strong word.
But
I don't like it, I have to say.
Do you not?
I don't approve of hate rhetoric. I think he was right to apologise, but I equally think he had the right to say what he thought.
But I think you have a right to hate people.
And he certainly shouldn't have had his Amazon show cancelled because of it. I think that's ridiculous. Let us know your thoughts on all of the topics that we're covering.
Do you think it's okay to hate? What do you mean by hate? I mean, certain swear words, for instance, that mean really strong things to some people and not to other people. They're sort of like adjectives to other people, or they're humorous to other people.
Well, toilet, highly offensive to me. Can't use that word.
Toilet?
Yeah, I should say loo. It's like a swear word to me.
That's French, isn't it, loo?
Or toilet.
No, loo.
Is it? I don't know. Water.
Toilet probably is as
anyway,
well.
we digress.
Loo means water. As in loo, loo. And it used to be the French used to basically, they did their pee in their potties and they would open the window and throw it out the top window. So they would say, loo, loo. So when you heard someone saying loo, duck. Basically, that's it. Right, the time, 2 minutes past 6. Big news this morning. Metropolitan Police is facing calls for urgent reform after an officer was revealed to be one of Britain's most prolific sex offenders.
PC David Carrick pleaded guilty to 71 sex crimes, including 24 counts of rape, when he appeared at London's Southwark Crown Court yesterday.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Mark Riley, has apologised to the victims and vowed to take action to root out sexual abuse in the force.
Well, for more, we're joined by retired police officer and campaigner Norman Brennan. Good morning to you, Norman. I think it's impossible to overstate how horrendous this story is. Really, really shocking, and I can't recall anything quite like it from within the Metropolitan Police Service.
Well, since the murder of Sarah Everard by Wayne Couzens, look, let's calm things down. These are horrific headlines, catastrophic for the Metropolitan Police and policing as a whole. I'm part of the police family. I've been part of the police family for 43 years. No, we have never seen anything this dreadful. We started putting reforms in, certainly the Met Police.
But Norman, we were told that about Wayne Couzens. We were told this was a one-off. It's not there, but it is there. It's there again.
I'm not telling you it isn't. If you'd let me finish, Eamonn. What I'm saying is that there are tens of thousands of frontline men and women today that have woken up as horrific as a crime this is. They share the public's concern, and it was them that actually arrested Wayne Couzens, and it is them that arrested this horrific sex offender. It is absolutely right that we look at reforms. Now, when Wayne Couzens' incident happened, the Met immediately set up a task force to deal with it. This individual was committing crimes before then. It has now come to light that he committed dozens of rapes and other horrific crimes, and their female victims were frightened to report it. Well, that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to me, to you, the public, and the rest of the police service. We
But it's
have been let down
understandable.
by it.
It's understandable why they didn't report it.
Absolutely. And we need to look at why they didn't report it. Now, no police officer should have that sort of power where there isn't an organisation where a woman cannot go to privately. They make that phone call privately, just like to Crime Stoppers. And I can promise you this, that once the Independent Office of Police Complaints, which a lot of us within the police service are not actually friends with, once they get a sniff of something like this, they're not the ones to be crossed. They will ensure that an independent investigation is open. And I'm sorry,
Norman, I just want to point out, they got a sniff of it for 20 odd years. You know, this went on for 20 odd years.
Eamonn, do you know what? Some of the biggest corrupt police officers in Britain, Nurse Allett, Dr. Harold Shipman, they carried out their crimes where everybody thought that they were exemplary people. It was latterly found out that they were nothing of the sort. They were murderers. The exact same thing happens within the police. Do you know what? When I was serving, there were some officers that were arrested for certain offences and some for very serious offences that astounded us. The thing about police officers that commit these types of crimes are they are very good at hiding them. And when you're good at hiding them, it's pretty much like when you're recruited as a police officer, you may be an exemplary character, yet 5 or 10 years down the road, you turn rogue. We've got to look at recruiting, we've got to look at vetting, and we've got to make sure that supervisors and senior officers within the police have got a grip on frontline officers. We've got to ensure that we re-vet officers every now and then, because this is a smear on the entire police family. We're as abhorrent as every member of the public. We feel the exact same way, and it's the police service that got to pick up the pieces, and it's the police service that I must tell the public and victims of crime, you cannot give up on.
Yeah,
They've let you down.
Yeah, and look, Norman Brennan, lots of people will agree, and, you know, of course, we're grateful that police run towards danger and in the vast majority of cases keep us safe. But there have been, time and again, these horrors coming out of the Metropolitan Police, whether it be misogynistic WhatsApp messages, whether it's sharing pictures of dead bodies, whether it's the policing at a Sarah Everard vigil, or whether or not it's these 1,000 cases that are now being reviewed of serving Metropolitan officers who've been accused of domestic violence or sex offences, including rape. It's not good enough. It's not just a few people.
I agree. We are living in an era where it's unprecedented crime. We've got hatred, we've got anger, we've got belligerence throughout society, and it appears that policing has got involved in this swirl where we're recruiting some people in a desperation to hit certain targets that are not the right type. Until we get robo-cops that never make a mistake, you've got to rely on men and women. Don't forget, the public, or the police are the public are the police. So we must look within ourselves to see what we can do better. And the public mustn't give up on us. We won't give up on the public, and they can't give up on us. Because if we continue to row and argue and there's this mistrust, then how are we going to work together to tackle crime where gun crime, knife crime, violent crime, burglary, street robberies, rape is out of control? Yes, someone has let us down within policing. They've let you down. But do not smear the tens of thousands of honest, hard-working men and women that get up every day and are not the Wayne cousins and this despicable individual that raped and made women feel small and inadequate. I want anyone and everyone, be you man, woman or child, if you're a victim of crime and you believe a police officer is involved in any criminality, tell us, and tell us immediately. I just wished that some of these women had told us much, much earlier. I understand why they didn't, but the sooner you tell us, the sooner we can start arresting and taking rogues like this individual out of the police service and off of our streets.
Yeah, but Norman, you know, an impassioned defence there, and a lot of people will agree with you, of course. But we heard it all with Wayne Couzens. We heard it before. And the headlines that you're seeing screaming out of the newspapers today, just how many more monsters in uniform That's how, you know, police officers are being described. And just how did police miss a serial rapist in its ranks? Those questions stay there. Those questions are at the foremost of a lot of people's minds, and none of this does recruitment in the police any good, and none of this does public faith, particularly from women, I would say, in the police, any good.
Eamonn, I can't disagree with you. You and me have known each other for decades. I was a frontline police officer in London, proud, 31 years. 43 years on, I'm still involved. I represent police, victims and the public, a unique position. It is a shameful day for policing. It's a shameful day for the criminal justice system. And I understand the mistrust within the public. And yes, we must look to recruit. But don't forget, there were already investigations and inquiries underway after Wayne Couzens. The new commissioner has come in. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's certainly a stern individual, and he must be allowed to get on with the job that he's doing. I agree. Let's get retired police officers out. Do you realise, Eamonn, some police officers that join the police don't even have a face-to-face issue or appointment, a meeting. When I joined the police service, my references, they were seen by senior police officers. I had to have face-to-face interviews. That has all changed. The sad reality is we're recruiting some of the wrong types, and we only have to have one bad person like Wayne Couzens and this individual character that carried out these horrific rapes. And yes, I know a number of other police officers committed crime that slurs the rest of the police service. And I don't apologise for sitting in front of you and saying, yes, we have got bad officers within our ranks. They need to be got rid of. But don't forget the tens of thousands of honest, hard-working men and women, people like me that dedicated my life to keeping the streets safe. And some of us nearly lost our lives, yet still turn up. You cannot allow this one or two individuals that have caused these horrific headlines and committed these horrific crimes to slur the rest of the police service. If we've got any other bad ones amongst our ranks, the commissioner is trying to get them out, and every police crime commissioner, chief constable, sergeant, inspector, chief inspector, if you have any doubts whatsoever that there's a wrong amongst your ranks, you know what to do, because I know what you should be doing as well, and so do the public and victims of crime.
Yeah, well, PC David Carrick had a nickname, didn't he, within the Diplomatic Protection Office Corps. Implies that lots of people knew his character. And as you say, it wasn't a recent thing. He'd been in that service for 2 decades. Look, we'll leave it at that. Norman Brennan, thank you very much for your time this morning. Retired police officer and leading campaigner on police protection.
Thanks, Norman. Thank you very much indeed. Do you agree with what you've heard from Norman Brennan there? Or if you are a woman, what is your faith in the police force? Do you have less because of that? Maybe you have an experience, maybe you've been married to an officer where you have felt that the culture has changed the relationship between you and your partner. And, you know, if you've got another story to tell, as Norman Brennan was saying there, if you know of someone, turn them in. 30 minutes past 6.
Other big news this morning. Teachers are to go on strike in England and Wales from the 1st of February. The National Education Union made the announcement yesterday evening. OK, so these walkouts are by Britain's largest education union, and it will mean that pupils who are at GCSE level will have had just 1 year of interrupted learning. Well, joining us now is the diary editor at The Spectator, James Hill. Good morning to you. Goodness me, this is going to go down very badly with working families, the very families that the government claimed to be trying to stand up for with this new legislation that was voted through with a 60 majority last night. But they're not going to feel like they've got the support of the government in this.
Well, quite. And I think that a lot of people who haven't previously been affected by the strikes, either because they've been doing things like home working, virtual working, or have thankfully not had to be involved in the health service during the recent strikes, are now going to feel the impact of that industrial action. And of course, their children as well. And children, I think, had about 22 weeks of interrupted learning during COVID, due to the various lockdowns and not allowing children into schools. So I think they're going to be affected well. And it's just another thing which is going to impede children's education in this country, which is why we've seen people like the Children's Commissioner come out and express their concerns about the impact.
Can you just explain to us exactly what they've been offered? Because my understanding is it's actually been quite a reasonable offer in terms of compared to other public sectors? Obviously, the cost of living crisis is affecting everybody. But what exactly is on the table? Sure. What are their objections? And it's not just about, it's all about retention as well.
It is largely about retention. There's about 130,000 vacancies, I believe, across the country in teaching. But for new teachers have been offered an 8.9% pay rise. More established senior teachers have been offered a 5% pay rise. The concern is partly around that sort of decade of which pay has been impacted by inflation, etc., over the past decade. So it's about historic low pay, but also it's about where the money's going to come from in terms of the budget. Now, Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, says that the government's given £2 billion. We put more money into the Department of Education before, but teachers are concerned that it's going to come out of existing budgets for classroom materials and teaching rather than for staff pay specifically. So their concern is...
James, that is the thing. That is quite sobering. When you say existing budgets, we're not talking about departmental budgets. We're talking about school budgets. Apparently, if you want to pay a teacher more, then you have to do without school trips, or you have to do without another member of staff or teaching assistants or whatever. It comes out of the pre-allocated budget for that particular school.
I mean, effectively, this is what all these strikes are really about, in a sense, in that you have to choose between the services and the staff, and how do you reconcile those two things? Like the health service, you put money into the health service. That means, obviously, you're going to put more money into, say, nurses' pay rises. That means it won't go into the service of health. Now, there's trade-offs involved in that, but I think that as with I think people are not getting involved in teaching, are not feeling as though they're being rewarded properly or being looked after or being valued for their services, which is why we're seeing such high levels of staff vacancies at the moment, which is why, for instance, Rishi Sunak's pledge to try and make maths compulsory to 18 is just not going to happen because we don't have enough skilled teachers in this country to do those kind of things.
How do you think the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are playing in all of this? Chancellor being dubbed Iron Hunt, but he's absolutely adamant that he can't give these pay rises because it's inflationary, and his number one priority is to get inflation halved to 5%, and he says he will not be distracted from that goal. I mean, you can understand why he wants to do it, but is the public sympathy with him on that?
It's an interesting question. I think that what we've seen really is that public sympathy is very varied across a number of sectors. Obviously, they're most sympathetic, as you'd probably expect, towards the health sector, to ambulance workers and NHS staff. What they're less sympathetic towards, for instance, the rail workers going on strike. What we are seeing is that there's, I think, a much more of an olive branch being offered from the government towards union workers. You can see that in the strikes on the rail between ASLEF and RMT, and you can also see that in some of the talk around the RCN and the Royal College of Nursing. But I still think that the line broadly in the government is holding, and only a couple of MPs have really come out and criticised that on the Conservative benches.
James, I've got to ask you about the row between Nicola Sturgeon and Westminster. Look, on the face of it, people might think, this doesn't relate to them a huge amount, the transgender argument, whether or not it should be made easier, which is what the Scottish have voted to do and Westminster has blocked. But actually, this is playing into the hands by stepping in this way, is it not, into the argument about independence for Nicola Sturgeon? This
has been the concern in Downing Street, and they've just accepted the legal advice, which is why they've decided to go on this route. Effectively, what it means is that, where does the power of the government in Scotland lie vis-a-vis to that of Westminster? And the concern is that the equalities legislation UK-wide would be affected by this new law that they've passed on gender reform recognition. It's the first time in 25 years that the Westminster government has used this device called Section 35. And the concern is, of course, that it's going to set up a legal showdown which Nicola Sturgeon can then use to energise her base in order to suggest that it have any power within the union.
James, thanks very much. We'll leave it there. James Heal is the diary editor of The Spectator. Thank you.
We should say also the author of Out of the Blue, a book about Liz Truss. And I just want to ask you, any ideas for a title for Boris's memoirs?
I fear we're not done with Boris Johnson yet. So, I think maybe a prequel for the sequel. Them's the breaks.
OK, thanks.
So where is Liz Truss these days? What is she doing?
I think she's keeping her head down largely, but she's making a few appearances here and there. I spotted her at a couple of Westminster restaurants recently. So she might make something coming back soon.
Did she give you a hello and a wave?
I don't think she saw me.
Right. Very good. James Hill, thank you.
Coming up to 8:20, let's bring you up to date with the rest of the stories making the news today. The Prime Minister's facing pressure from Conservative MPs to toughen up punishments for those who fail to protect children from online harm. Around 50 MPs have put their names to an amendment to the online safety bill in an attempt to hold tech chiefs criminally liable if they do not block damaging content.
The inquest into 5 people shot dead in Plymouth last year will resume today. 22-year-old Jake Davison killed his mother Maxine after a row and then shot dead 4 others before turning the gun on himself.
The television presenter Jeremy Clarkson has said he emailed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex on Christmas Day to apologise over his column in the Sun newspaper. However, a spokesman for the Sussexes said he did not address his long-standing pattern of spreading hate rhetoric, dangerous conspiracy theories and misogyny. Well, on this subject, Petronilla Wyatt, who's a journalist, spoke about Clarkson's comments on Dan Wootton tonight on GBNews last night. Here's what she had to say.
I was furious with Jeremy Clarkson because it was so stupid, because what he wrote actually made it appear as if Harry and Meghan temporarily had a point. And that's what really irritated me. And I think he should have been punished for that alone. This new statement on behalf of Harry and Meghan is very, very sinister because, in my view, this was an isolated incident. It was one unfortunate remark made by a man who'd probably drunk a little too much before Christmas.
Well, let us know what you think about all of this. We understand, according to Variety magazine and The Telegraph, that actually, as a result, Amazon's cutting his show, Clarkson's Farm. He's effectively being cancelled and all of this. And I do think that would be a real shame. I love that show. Absolutely love that show.
I love that show.
And we should be able to say what we think. And he has said sorry. Do we really think that we should live in a world where if you disagree with somebody, you cancel them? Let us know your thoughts and whether or not you think he was sharing hate rhetoric.
Well, you say, I wouldn't condone what he had to say and the way he had to say it, but he said it about lots of people. And the thing about Clarkson is a lot of people find what he says so pantomimish that it is just, it's humour, it's funny, it's so ridiculous, it has to be funny. But obviously there's nothing seen as funny in this particular one. But your view, Jeremy Clarkson, I mean, he's an amazing writer. It's a pity he just wrote like this.
Well, also, I think he did such a good thing for the countryside with that show, really showing us what the countryside is all about, real Britain. And to lose it over this, and clearly he had tried to change things and apologise. His daughter was offended by it as well, which I think must have been a huge blow for him.
Yes.
He certainly paid a price, hasn't he? Let us know your views. GBViews@GBNews.uk.
But if the Sussexes are all about forgiveness...
The ripples of reconciliation spreading around the world.
Well, obviously they're not. They had a brick wall there.
Well, also on that, I mean, is this a warning to William and Charles, the King and the Prince of Wales? If you apologise, could still get thrown back in your face. Apologies not necessarily good enough.
Yes, it might be seen as a form of weakness. Whoever said that? Never apologise, Mr. Pennell. It's a sign of weakness.
Is it John Wayne?
Spooky. How did you know that?
I don't know. It's just one of your very good impersonations.
And she wore a yellow ribbon. That was the film. That's a brilliant film.
I like those movies, the black and white ones. Was it black and white?
No, it's a beautiful colour movie.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. And on her head she wore a yellow ribbon. She wore it for her sweetheart in the U.S. Cavalry. Anyway, well, how do I know this junk?
I don't know.
I know nothing about anything, but I know things
the
like
good
that.
stuff, the
There you
important
go.
stuff.
Yeah.
Look, we're going to be back after the break talking about how cold. -3 when I left the house this morning. Here are the details.
Well, look what it's done to your shoulders. It's frozen them. Goodness me. Here's the weather forecast.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern. It's a freezing start out there. Widespread frost up and down the country. Icy patches in the north and the northwest, and in some places further snow expected through the rest of the day. But the snow is very hit and miss at the moment. It's coming in on a north to northwesterly wind, and so it's windward coasts predominantly that are seeing the snow showers. And with good shelter, inland and southeastern parts of the UK, just seeing sunny skies as we start the day. Perhaps a few fog patches. They'll be slow to clear, but otherwise plenty of crisp winter sunshine. However, some icy patches to watch out for in the southwest, across parts of Wales, northwest England, Northern Ireland and northern Scotland. And in the northwest, we're going to continue to see these showers coming in. Mostly these showers are sleet and snow, but for the Northern Isles, something a little milder starts to mix in, so rain showers more likely as we end the afternoon. But here it will turn increasingly windy, those winds strengthening to gale force, bringing a spell of more persistent rain and sleet at lower levels and snow over the hills, blizzard conditions by evening across higher parts of northern Scotland, and drifting of snow. Showers also piling into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales and the west of England overnight. And widely, wherever you are, another frosty night. I think with a bit more of a breeze, temperatures not falling quite as far, but still a frosty start as we begin Wednesday. Another bright start, though, in the south and the east particularly, plenty of sunshine. And in the north, we'll see the area of more persistent rain, sleet and snow move into eastern Scotland and push into northeast England through the day. So some snow building up over the hills of northern England and eastern Scotland. Northern Ireland also seeing further showers, as well as Wales and the southwest. Again, a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and snow. But away from these areas, sunny spells. And then on Thursday, the showers become more confined to eastern parts of the UK. Western areas seeing plenty of sunny skies, but it does stay cold. Temperatures only slowly coming up on Friday and the weekend.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Just going to look ahead at some of the things still to come on this show this morning, just after 7 o'clock. If you're still with us, we'll be bringing you the latest unemployment figures. I hope you're not one of them, as they will be released just after 7.
At 7:45, we'll be speaking to a blind football player about representation for the visually impaired community. That's after the first partially sighted Love Island contest entered the villa last night.
Did you watch that last night?
I didn't. It was after my bedtime.
Yeah. No, just wondering.
I've seen all the commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of excitement. Maya Jama doing her thing, or is she not on it yet?
Oh, I forgot about that Maya Jama. Yeah, she was on it.
Yeah,
No, yeah, she was on it. Yeah, yeah.
Lots of you getting in touch this morning. Thank you very much indeed for that. Karen says Nicola Sturgeon went beyond her boundaries. Good on Rishi for stopping her. What happened to women's rights? It's like we don't have them anymore. Thank you very much.
The whole police thing that we're dealing with today. Appalling act. We're talking about this guy. And says Keith, he said, but it doesn't automatically mean that every policeman is a rapist. Karen says it's one of those societies when you put your life in their hands, but look at what happened. It's absolutely disgraceful. Frank says you get bad eggs in all walks of life. Without police, where would the country be? Very good point.
Are they attracted to power? That's the question. Are there a disproportionate number of bad eggs in the police force? It feels that way, certainly in London at the moment.
David in Lincolnshire. Good morning, David. A lot of the problems these days are due to lack of discipline. Face-to-face interviews, which Norman Brennan, ex-police officer, highlighted to us. Sergeants and inspectors are the ranks which particularly need to supervise the officers and monitor their behaviour. There are not many bad characters in the police, and the few that are need to serve severe consequences.
Keep your thoughts coming in.
Just want to keep you abreast of what's happening weather-wise if you haven't poked your nose out the door or out the window today.
It's cold.
It is cold. It's very cold.
Really cold.
But how cold? Let's go to John Hammond, and he's going to tell us about this because there is a yellow warning of snow and ice. The thing that gets me, John, you get up on a day like this and then you realise the car windows frosted over and things, and that's where you got to give yourself an extra 10 minutes or so. Morning.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Morning, you two. Yeah, we've got as low as -8 degrees, -9 in one or two places, even across southern England. So we're not just talking about the glens of Scotland. A severe frost out there, a crunchy start, as you say. You'll have to allow a bit of extra time to scrape the old windscreen and defrost the car. There's a bit of snow around, even across Cornwall, and not every winter you get dusting of snow across the tip of Cornwall, but that is the case this morning. And yeah, and locally, some of us are waking up to a winter wonderland out there. Primarily the usual suspects, the north of Scotland, parts of the Northern Ireland, some snow showers across parts of northwest England and North Wales. That said, actually, most of us haven't seen a flake of snow. And I'll stick my neck out and say that most of us actually won't see a flake of snow throughout this cold spell. But having said that, given we've had a month of mild weather, it is a shock to the system, and it is going to hang around for the rest of this week. So, yeah, you're going to need your scraper to hand, you're going to need your de-icer to hand, because they will be needed over the next few mornings, because we're going to see further severe frosts, I think, through this week. Fog might be an issue later on this week when the winds fall light, freezing fog at that. So, you know, many viewers out there will be thinking, hey, this is January, this is what we get, there's nothing extraordinary about this spell, and that's absolutely right. But given how mild it's been, and given how much water there is across the landscape, everything is going to freeze. So ice is going to be a big player over the next few days and nights, given how wet the landscape is after all that heavy rain that we've had. And of course, as we've already seen before Christmas, with the tragedy of the children that fell through the ice, a word of warning for parents out there: if you've got young children who are thinking of going out and skating on that pond, make sure they don't, because there will be a lot of thin ice out there over the next few days.
Absolutely, always worth underlining that advice, because that truly was tragic just before Christmas. But you're talking about how mild it's been. I think it was 13 degrees or something like that on Christmas Day, wasn't it? And yet, yesterday, we were all expecting to wake up, certainly in the capital, to a winter wonderland. And in fact, it was torrential sort of rain. And I think that put a lot of people into the mindset of ignoring this cold snap, thinking, the forecast got it wrong. Because that's what I did. I thought, well, yeah, I mean, snow, what they're talking about. And then sure enough, you say, well, you could still have cold weather all week. So, you know, can we trust the forecasts?
Well, the problem with these warnings is the Met Office are damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. Because, as you know, if you get a flake of snow in London, then all hell breaks loose, doesn't it? And mayhem can quickly happen in the capital with just a dusting of snow. So the snow didn't occur across parts of the southeast, but, you know, there are other warnings in force across the country. On the Met Office website, you'll see the details of those warnings. And I think the main issue over the next few days will be ice, given just how much water we've had, rainfall. The good news is that we're not going to see a lot of rain through the rest of this week, and indeed beyond that, through next week and possibly beyond, through into February. The signs are that we're into a dry spell now, so that has to be good news given the concerns about flooding. There's a lot of rivers which are still pretty high, but they should start to subside, and the concerns about flooding should drain away, literally and metaphorically, over the next few days, because a lot of dry weather is forecast, albeit quite cold, through the rest of this week.
That's my favourite type of weather, cold and dry in winter.
Yeah, and blue skies.
And blue skies.
John, don't you be beating yourself up about wrong forecasts. Who, for instance, look at all those doom mongers who didn't forecast the resurgence of the mighty Reds at the heady tops of the Premier League.
I'll tell you what, I've never felt more optimistic. Not since Fergie's time have I felt as optimistic as I am right now.
Good feeling,
How did you know he was a Man United fan?
John and I are like that.
Ah, I thought you just know each other.
We just
I reckon top 3, Eamonn. Top 3 at least.
At least top 2, top 1 maybe. Who knows?
Well,
I mean, Newcastle will not last. They'll not last there. Spurs will do
They won't.
nothing.
They won't last. It's between us and City and maybe Arsenal.
Yeah. Maybe well, okay. There's another bad forecast again, I would say. My friend, lovely talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Very comprehensive stuff there. You put us in the picture very, very well. Have a good day.
Do you do that thing of looking at the forecast on your phone and checking up Northern Ireland and at home? Because I see what my brother's forecast is like. He's in the Highlands of Scotland, and I thought, oh, they've got -4 and snow but blue skies. And I think, can you imagine anything more beautiful in the mountains? Do you do that?
Absolutely. I not only look at the Northern Irish weather, I watch the Northern Irish news every single night. I read the Northern Irish newspapers.
You're in the Northern Irish newspapers most days.
Well, so are you. Right. So nobody knew you. And now in Belfast, you're big.
I've never been there.
You're big. So I sent you that
you did.
Belfast Telegraph last night. And, But that's it depends what you're drawn to, where you feel a sense of belonging. And, that's me. That's where I am.
Northern Ireland in there. What's the forecast there today? Put
you
on the
spot. You can take the boy out of Belfast, but you can't take Belfast out of the boy. Remember that.
True.
Okay. A time at 25 to 7. You asked me what the forecast is. There's always rain.
There's rain.
There's always rain. We're going to go to the break. After that, we've got the newspapers this morning. We've got Norman Baker, Claire Purcell. Back with them after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back, 6:38. Time to bring you up to date with today's front pages of the newspapers. This is how they're shaping up.
Here's the Telegraph, first of all, and like most newspapers, it leads with the Metropolitan Police Commissioner's apology to victims after a serving officer was revealed to be a serial rapist. Going to be talking about that next.
The Guardian also featuring PC David Carrick and his brutal campaign of rape and terror.
A lot of newspapers asking how he got away with it, how the police missed the serial rapist throughout 20 years. 20 years. The Times, it focuses on the mass walkout by teachers, which will hit millions of schools, not millions of schools, millions of pupils in lots of schools.
And finally, the Mirror paying tribute to the late actress Gina Lollobrigida after she died.
No, what are you
Lollobrigida? You read it.
Gina Lollobrigida.
Sorry.
What? Don't tell me you don't know who she
95.
was.
I recognise her, okay, but you know, 95 is pretty old.
Norman Baker will have had an eye on Gina Lollobrigida.
Well, she was 95.
I mean, exactly.
No, but when in her heyday in the 50s and
Oh, I wasn't around then, Eamonn.
Exactly. If Norman thinks
you're not
he's
aware
too
of Gina
old.
Lollobrigida? Seriously?
Young.
I'm too young to know about all
So
that.
she's in the Sophia Loren.
Yes, yeah.
You know? Yeah. Anyway, there we go. You have seen she wore a yellow ribbon, have you?
No.
I'll save you the rendition of it again. I'll save you all of that. Joining Norman, former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell here as well. Very nice to see you, Claire. So let's begin, guys. And Claire, from a woman's perspective, first of all, I think in this one, blind eye turned to Met rapist, says the Mirror, and that's just what everybody's asking. How on earth did this man get away with this for so long?
And that is a question that really needs to be answered, and very, very quickly. 49 offences he has admitted. 24 rape claims. I mean, this is not somebody with a small amount of bad behaviour. This is an inherently bad individual. The Met Police haven't dealt with, and they had many, many opportunities to deal with him at the time. Even as late on as 2021, when a rape was reported, he was put on restricted duties, but wasn't re-vetted, and then was just allowed to continue after that. And you've got to wonder what the Met Police's vetting structure is, because obviously it isn't good enough. This is not the first officer, and the majority of papers are now saying how many more are out there, calling them monsters. And I think that we have the right to be extremely concerned that the Met Police don't take these things seriously, they don't re-vet their officers, and they don't pay attention to women, which I find the most concerning factor. And the victim blaming that goes on as to why women aren't coming forward and reporting this really has to stop. That
the women
narrative
have come
is
forward
appalling.
sooner is the line that we're hearing.
But guys, legitimately it will be a question. I totally agree, I'm not disagreeing with you, but people will be asking the question, why didn't someone come forward? And I think the obvious thing is that this man was in a position of power. And if a woman goes to the police, we're thinking he's going to hear about this as well. But how some men get away with this coercive control. I mean, he was living in his life a dreamland where he was being basically fed victims and allowed to get away. It just beggars belief.
Misusing his warrant card so people would trust him, so women would think they were safe, and then actually telling women, if you try and complain about it, no one's going to believe you.
Well, I want to bring in Norman Baker, because obviously you spent time in the Home Office. Well, the government yesterday saying that this was a sobering moment for the Met Police. But should the government still have confidence in the Metropolitan Police? Should they still have confidence in their new commissioner?
Well, I mean, Mark Rowley says, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. I mean, we've been here before, haven't we? And what we have to do is to try to make sure it doesn't happen again, rather than just apologising each time someone comes out of the woodwork who's of this nature. You know, it's interesting you mentioned Solar Braverman, because what we have is also yesterday was the police being given more powers over individuals in terms of identifying those who might break the law, and the police ability to stop them before they break the law. This is in terms of environmental protesters and so on. You know, the police have got tremendous power over individuals. They've got the power of arrest. They've got a status in society. And the idea that they haven't been vetted properly is just unbelievable. You know, there are guidelines from the College of Policing on vetting, but police forces are not obliged to follow them. This is absolutely extraordinary. We're talking in this guy about 9 times he was reported for crimes. We're talking about 80 sex offences, 48 rapes over decades. How can this man not have been picked up? You know, there's a really systemic, serious issues, not just for the Met, but for the police force as a whole. And, you know, in order for society to work properly, the public have to have confidence in the police. We cannot have a totalitarian regime where the police kind of bang people over the head. We have to have policing by consensus. And we're not going to have that if people don't have confidence that the police officers are honest and straight.
Absolutely. And we know that there's 1,000 horrible cases being reviewed by police officers, and Mark Rowley actually saying there will be more horrible instances and officers coming forward as a result of those investigations.
There will be. And there's one other issue, actually, which is that women who report rapes, the chances of those rapes ending up with convictions is tiny. It's really remarkably small. I tried to address this in the Home Office when I was there. You know, you're down now to about 3 or 4%. It's absolutely shocking.
Yeah, there was a case I was going to refer to, but I won't because it's still ongoing. The Foreign Secretary's in Washington. What's he there for? What's he looking to do?
This is Foreign Secretary James Cleverly out in the US to call on the US government to go further and faster for support to Ukraine. James Cleverly doesn't believe that the US are pulling their weight and are in fact now starting to question giving US aid to Ukraine. So he's out there at the moment to offer reassurances to Washington officials and to the president to say, let's keep up the pressure out here, let's help Ukraine.
What reassurances can you give to the biggest military power in the world?
I think that's a really good question, and it's one of those things that everybody says we are here to give you an assurance that it's all going to work out well, which of course we can't do. And certainly the UK government can't do that. I think it's important for the Foreign Secretary to get the agreement of the US administration to support Ukraine going forward, because I do think there is a move in the US to stop that aid going. And I think the mood of the US public is starting to wonder why they're pouring those millions into a place that's very far away. That's a very simplistic view. But I think with us, it's a closer place. Ukraine is in Europe, so it's closer to us and people understand and support it. But I think that the US support is definitely on the wane. So anything that he can do to back that up, I think is very, very important.
Isabel and I were talking yesterday, and what we can't understand is why at the start of this whole conflict, that if you were seen to lend support tactically or with armaments or whatever to Ukraine, Russia would have viewed that as direct warfare with them. So how come now we can take 14 tanks, Norman, and there will be no consequences? We're not actually part of this war.
Well, there was a view, you're right, in saying that the Western countries, Germany in particular, were very wary about giving weapons. They were giving helmets and other things to Ukraine in order not to antagonise the Russians. But, you know, the fact is that we've seen Ukraine showing great courage, amazing skill, actually, on the battlefield to hold back the Russians. The Russians have been incompetent as well, which has probably helped that particular scenario. And I think we're now in a situation where it's potentially possible for Ukraine to win. And if the alternative...
But that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, why isn't Putin saying, oi, that we regard this as direct assault on us, you're now involved in this war.
World War III,
Well, I think he is saying that, but we're not necessarily hearing it anymore because he said it before. So I think that is still his... That's still the Kremlin line.
Interesting, our Foreign Secretary did get sanctioned by Russia yesterday after coming out and rallying the troops, literally. So, you know, Russia is trying, but as you say, is that voice being lost now?
I think it's been lost. I mean, if you listen to it on other stations, Al Jazeera or whatever, you'll probably hear more about what the Russians are actually saying. But the fact of the matter is that Putin is using every single weapon he can short of nuclear weapons. He's using food now as a weapon, that's quite clear. He's using energy as a weapon. He's got no compunction about bombing civilians in tower blocks. I mean, the man is out of control.
Can we talk about Scotland's gender laws? I was talking to a Scottish nationalist who said she was absolutely outraged by the move by Westminster and then very quickly delighted because she realised it played so perfectly into Nicola Sturgeon's hands and indeed to their campaign in arguing for independence.
I don't think the government in Westminster has decided to use this as a kind of battle. I think it's actually facing it as a real issue. And the real issue is not actually, in a way, about the Gender Recognition Act. The real issue is whether or not the Scottish Government has passed legislation which impacts on UK legislation in terms of the Equalities Act. That's actually the legal issue. And I think the government has taken legal advice quite carefully and has reached a conclusion that it does affect UK law. Now, that will be determined in the courts because Nicola Sturgeon will go to judicial review, I think, on that. So it's a legal issue. Of course, gender recognition is a hugely controversial issue, but actually it's really about that, whether or not UK law is being changed by the back door through the Scottish Parliament.
But could it lead through the back door to independence, playing into the hands of the independents?
Well, I don't think so, personally. I don't think it's that sort of issue. But, hey, I'm not in Scotland.
Yeah, I think it does have some really serious repercussions because the Scottish Parliament, it's a devolved administration. So you do then end up in the argument as to what use is a devolved administration if it can just be overridden. So I do think this is an enormous point where we'll see other administrations, you know, you're looking at Northern Ireland, looking at Wales. Now, wondering what's going to happen to them. So this is really quite serious. I don't think it's just about the gender recognition bill. That is used at the moment. You can see that Nicola Sturgeon's argument to the Scottish people is going to be, Westminster don't care about us, here is the call for independence. And I can see that coming loud and clear over the next 18 months on the run-up to an election.
Yeah, what was the phrase she said? This was some sort of... I'm trying to find the phrase now and I've lost it. So
full frontal
Full
attack.
frontal, yes. That's exactly it.
Yeah, he's using that as well. Right, are we done with papers? Right, okay. I'll tell you what I want to talk about. And the Star is the only paper, I think, that hasn't gone with the police rapist on the front page. But they've gone, Claire, with the world's most feared mafia boss caught after 30 years on the run. The only distasteful thing I have about this, great that this has happened, but this is typical of this awful fascination and romance that people have and the entertainment industry have with mafia. This absolute villain, 30 years, responsible for lots of murders and all sorts of things. How did they catch him?
They caught him in a clinic in Italy where he was receiving treatment for cancer. Now, this mafia boss, he's been on the run for 30 years. He's dubbed the sort of original godfather. And he's managed to hide himself away by dressing himself as a woman on some occasions. So you've got to wonder sometimes...
Maybe he quite liked it.
Maybe he did.
Yes.
Maybe you know, that was his transition moment.
Maybe that's his excuse.
This is a lesson to Nicola Sturgeon. It does happen. People
It does
take
happen.
advantage of these
I think that's
sorts of
quite...
things.
Was she dressing as a
No,
woman?
I'm saying people take advantage of making transgender rules easier than they can get into. Anyway.
I can tell you one thing from our Department for Transport days, which was that we did some studies on the safety of cyclists, and we found that drivers gave women on bikes more space than men on bikes. And there was some guy in London who was actually dressing up with a blonde wig in order to appear a woman, in order to give themselves more space from the drivers.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay.
Nice little
But there's a big ongoing trial still in Sicily against the mafia, and the judges and the prosecutors involved in all this have to have, you know, round-the-clock protection because of this. So it still is a very, very real...
I was in Venice for my birthday last year, and there was a huge sign right next to the Rialto Bridge saying, Venice says no to mafia. It was quite shocking to see it in black and white. I thought, oh.
Yeah, but would somebody stand with a banner or a poster? I mean, you might hide behind a bridge and say, you know, Venice says no, but would you say no? Scary thing.
Put your head above the parapet.
Guys, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. We're going to talk about terrible animal cruelty now, because this is a bit of a murder mystery thing. So we're talking about cats, which have become the victims of a shootist air gun attacks, and it happens in one particular street in Haywards Heath in West Sussex, and it's seen 4 of these shootings. The police say they can't find the culprit. They're not necessarily connected, these shootings. Let's go to our South East England reporter, Ray Addison. He has the details.
A typical suburban street in Haywards Heath, West Sussex. But somewhere close, there lurks what residents are calling a heartless shooter, an unknown attacker taking potshots at harmless cats. The latest victim lives here at number 8.
Oh, I know. The cuddles are nice, aren't they?
Frank was adopted just 2 months ago by Gemma and her partner Adam. But on New Year's Day, they found that he'd been shot with an air gun, the pellet entering his abdomen.
He had been out and about a little bit and he came inside and he had this really bad limp, like really bad limp. And then we found this wound on him. We just panicked, had to get straight onto the emergency vet. And that's where they discovered that he had in fact been shot.
The damage it caused was extensive, and the vet's bill came to just under £5,000.
He had to have blood transfusions and major surgery. It was horrible seeing this happen to him. It was heartbreaking.
But it's not the first attack. Just 2 doors down at Dan's house, 2 defenceless kittens were targeted. and this time it proved fatal.
I bought Fred and Dusty as a surprise birthday present for Donna, my wife, and obviously our 3 boys. Fred was unfortunately shot back in October of 2021. He was nursed back to health, and then he was unfortunately shot again. This time, unfortunately, the damage to his insides was way too much, so he unfortunately had to be put down.
Now, all of these attacks were reported to the police, but when we contacted them for a statement, they told us that they don't believe they're linked, which residents say is surprising.
It's definitely linked. I think it's mad they're not.
It doesn't take a genius to work out that it must be linked.
The charity Cats Protection says attacks like these are all too common in England and Wales, where air guns are unlicensed and cats are frequently the target.
We see around 100 media stories every year about cats being attacked with air guns, but that's likely to be just the tip of the iceberg. We've already seen licensing for air weapons introduced in Scotland and Northern Ireland. At the moment, around 90% of the press stories we see about cats being attacked with air weapons are in England and Wales, which kind of indicates that there is a problem and that this really needs to be addressed by the government.
It could easily happen again, and we really don't know what we're going to do about him when he's allowed out.
If licensing does go ahead, Cats Protection believe that would give local police a better chance of tracking down the perpetrators of vicious attacks. Until then, residents may have no option but to keep their cats indoors. That or let them walk the streets, knowing there's a hunter on the prowl. Ray Addison, GB News.
No, don't keep your cats indoors. Keep whoever's firing that rifle in prison. That's really what we want. What an awful situation. You've got a story to tell about that, something you want to add to that. One small step between shooting cats to shooting big cats, lions and trophy hunters.
Who knows, yeah, gateway into all sorts of weird behaviour. We'll be back after the break when we'll have more on the crisis in the Met, and we'll also bring you the very latest unemployment figures which are out in just a few minutes.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McKibben. It's a freezing start out there. Widespread frost up and down the country. Icy patches in the north and the northwest, and in some places further snow expected through the rest of the day. But the snow is very hit and miss at the moment. It's coming in on a north to northwesterly wind, and so it's windward coasts predominantly that are seeing the snow showers. And with good shelter, inland and southeastern parts of the UK, just seeing sunny skies as we start the day. Perhaps a few fog patches. They'll be slow to clear, but otherwise plenty of crisp winter sunshine. However, some icy patches to watch out for in the southwest, across parts of Wales, northwest England, Northern Ireland and northern Scotland. And in the northwest, we're going to continue to see these showers coming in. Mostly these showers are sleet and snow, but for the Northern Isles, something a little milder starts to mix in, so rain showers more likely as we end the afternoon. But here, it will turn increasingly windy. Those winds strengthening to gale force, bringing a spell of more persistent rain and sleet at lower levels and snow over the hills, blizzard conditions by evening across higher parts of northern Scotland, and drifting of snow. Showers also piling into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales and the west of England overnight. And widely, wherever you are, another frosty night. I think with a bit more of a breeze, temperatures not falling quite as far, but still a frosty start as we begin Wednesday. Another bright start though in the south and the east particularly, plenty of sunshine. And in the north, we'll see the area of more persistent rain, sleet and snow move into eastern Scotland and push into northeast England through the day. So some snow building up over the hills of northern England and eastern Scotland. Northern Ireland also seeing further showers, as well as Wales and the southwest. Again, a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and snow. But away from these areas, sunny spells. And then on Thursday, the showers become more confined to eastern parts of the UK. Western areas seeing plenty of sunny skies, but it does stay cold. Temperatures only slowly coming up on Friday and the weekend.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
The Metropolitan Police is plunged into crisis as an armed officer is revealed to be one of the country's worst serial rapists.
A very good morning to you. You're tuned in to Breakfast here on GB News on Tuesday, the 17th of January, with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster leading the programme this morning.
The Metropolitan Police is facing calls for urgent reform after one of its officers pleaded guilty to committing over 70 sex attacks over 18 years, including 24 rapes.
Teachers are going to strike in England and Wales from the 1st of February. The National Education Union has announced the walkouts will mean that GCSE pupils will have had just 1 year of uninterrupted learning.
The Prime Minister has blocked Scotland's controversial gender recognition bill, with First Minister Nicola Sturgeon calling it a full frontal attack on Scottish Parliament. The move by the government represents the first time Scottish legislation has been stopped by Westminster.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have accused the broadcaster Jeremy Clarkson of hate rhetoric. It comes after he issued a second public apology for a column he wrote about hating Meghan Markle. And on Jeremy Clarkson, Con says it's a free country, so it's okay for those two to slag off the royals and this proud country, but give it back to them, and they want an apology.
John says Jeremy Clarkson shouldn't have said what he did for Harry to call for the end of his career. He is an absolute hypocrite because he attacked all those people whilst running a mental health charity.
Stuart makes a very interesting point here in this cancel culture society, because, believe me, these TV executives run scared, and activists out there know it, because if you get, their big main sponsors being very woke and whatever, and they say, and they put pressure on companies like ITV, they phone up and they say, we're going to withdraw our advertising unless you get rid of somebody. Wonder who that could be I'm talking about. And basically, in Clarkson's case, Stuart says, if Amazon do cancel Jeremy Clarkson over this nonsense, he says, I, and I believe many others, will simply cancel our Amazon subscriptions. So that's the point.
Yeah.
The only thing that matters at the end of the day, no matter what all these woke companies and whatever try and the message they put out, the only thing they care about is money. You have all these companies that were complaining about the World Cup and Qatar and the abuses that were going on there and the inequalities and everything. Didn't stop them screening the World Cup. Didn't stop them raking in their highest advertising revenues of the
Didn't stop
year.
lots of people going shopping in Harrods, which is owned by the Qataris.
Yeah, but let's stick to the hypocrisy, not of us, but of TV
Well,
companies.
exactly.
That's what we want to take. So the cancel culture,
yeah.
I mean, that's it. I think the cancel culture is far too easy, and give them a bit of what they're giving everybody else, cancel them. Interesting point, Stuart.
To our top story now, the Metropolitan Police is facing calls for urgent reform this morning after an officer was revealed to be one of Britain's most prolific sex offenders.
This guy's called David Carrick. He was a PC. He pleaded guilty to 71 sex crimes, including 24 counts of rape when he appeared at London's Southwark Crown Court yesterday.
Well, the Met Commissioner, Mark Rowley, has apologised to the victims and has vowed to take action to root out others like Carrick on the force.
Well, for more, we're joined by retired police officer and campaigner Norman Brennan, who, last time we were talking to you, Norman, you made an impassioned plea that you hoped that all police officers wouldn't be tarred with the same brush as this hideous fiend Carrick. But the thing is, mud sticks, Norman.
Absolutely. It's a bad day at the office. It's another very bad day at the office. I can't defend the indefensible. What the police service need is an MOT. We need to ensure that the good parts remain and the bad parts are replaced. So what the public get is the best that the police can be given. And the only way to do that is to ensure that we recruit the right people, that supervisors supervise. The sad reality is, Eamonn, is that sadly nowadays many middle managers are so obsessed with high-ranking promotion, they're not very good at supervising. When you don't supervise, you then have officers which basically do what they want. The majority of frontline police officers are brilliant at patrolling on their own and giving the public the best that they possibly can. The sad reality is there are some that have slipped through the net that when they're on duty and also off duty are not very nice people. And here we have David Carrick, we've had Wayne Couzens. In 1.8 million police recruits, these are the two worst offenders we've had. And the sad reality is that they are police officers, but they are not the police. The police are tens of thousands of other men and women that are not Wayne Couzens, that are not David Carrick. And the sad reality is, as you rightly point out, the whole police service will be smeared by these two characters. And there's probably several dozen more that we need to root out. And that's what the Commissioner and other Chief Constables' priority must be.
Yeah, several dozen more. I mean, we're talking about one of Britain's worst serial sex offenders. We're talking about Wayne Couzens, the most brutal, vile exploitation and use of his power and rape of a young girl. And there could be several dozen more, and we say that, and you say that so casually. I mean, the fact that the Chief Commissioner is investigating 1,000 serving officers for a long list of offences, from domestic violence, sex offenders, including rape, it's sickening.
Please don't misquote me. I didn't say there were several double more Wayne Couzens and David Carricks. There are several dozen more, I'm certain, out of these 1,600 that have behaved disgracefully against women when they're off duty. That's who I'm talking about. I pray to God there's never another Wayne Couzens or David Carrick. I truly do. But there are rogue police officers. I can't say that there's not. The Commissioner has stated that there are hundreds that he is looking into. Well, many police officers get complaints made against them. Some are malicious complaints. But we must ensure that the ones that are not malicious are dealt with, and that those officers where there's evidence are dealt with appropriately. Look, we hear sometimes that we have officers with nicknames that are quite horrible. Well, all of us within policing have had nicknames of one shape or another. Some are nice, some are not so pleasant. However, unless you actually have evidence that somebody has got a nickname because they're a sexual offender or they're a thief or they've done something criminal, that is not enough to arrest and put them before the courts. So let's get some sort of balance on this, please.
Okay. Tell me this, though. Is there a problem with secret societies within the police force? Is it something that you have encountered whilst you were there? And I ask you this, I'm talking specifically about groups like the Masons, because we've had an email this morning from one of our viewers, a guy called Jason. He says, I was a serving sergeant for over 20 years in South London. A female officer was raped. Senior management did an appalling investigation. He alleges, basically, that there was a senior Mason who was on the team, and men many of his staff are also Masons. He says until secret societies abandon the police, the corruption will continue. He says it's endemic.
I mean, I can't comment on that. I was never a Mason. I heard about the Masons, and I'm sure there's been some misgoings on within some of them. However, the police officers that commit these crimes are the ones that sometimes are never noticed. You've just highlighted that somebody was allegedly raped and the police covered it up or didn't investigate it properly. I was a police officer for 31 years. I would be ashamed if any of my colleagues or myself, having taken a complaint of rape, and I dealt with rapes when I was a serving officer, and I gave of my best. My colleagues gave of our best. We didn't win them all, and when we didn't win them, even when we know we had the right person, we still tried to do our best. And that's what most police officers try to do. We're talking today about a few rogue officers. Well, when I say a few, there could be dozens of rogue officers that have committed crimes that we don't know about, but the victims do. Now, every female watching this programme must feel reassured that there is somewhere that they could go to. This David Carrick character apparently has committed offences for 18 years. Why didn't they tell us? And when they did tell us, why didn't they follow through with making a complaint and attending court and giving evidence? Because the sad thing is that what happens with a number of rapists, folks, is that the victim, when they don't make a complaint or they've made a complaint, then withdraw it, you cannot charge and take that person to court. So that person remains innocent. And it appears that this individual has committed numerous rapes and never been found out.
You know and I know it's not as simple as you've just highlighted there, because the reason that a lot of people didn't come forward was fear. He was able to say to his women victims, he said, who's going to believe you anyway? I'm a police officer and you're not.
Yeah, but he is a police officer and there are tens of thousands of other police officers that would not tolerate that officer's behaviour. And Wayne Couzens and David Carrick were arrested.
As a vulnerable victim, are you going to take that chance? And the fact that he got away with it and away with it and away with it 24 times and counting means that they obviously did believe him and they did fear that they weren't going to be investigated impartially about all of this. And the other question I want to ask you is, we talk about women, but what about women within the police force? Women who have to put up with this sort of behaviour or overtly macho behaviour all around them. Well, there's no advert here for any woman to come forward and say, I would like to join the police force for what they think are very, very noble reasons. But if there are people like David Carrick being harboured within those ranks?
There's about 45% of the police service are now women. I think a third to a half of chief constables are women. I can assure you, Eamonn, that I don't know many police women within policing that would tolerate that sort of behaviour. In fact, I'd like to feel that it's...
So you're saying if an officer, a male officer, was trying something on or abusing his position with a female officer, you think they would have the strength, the courage, the fortitude to report that in every case?
Not in every case, but in hopefully the majority of the cases. And also it'll be male officers that also won't tolerate that. I follow policing every day of the week. I've been involved in policing for 43 years. And the tolerance of female officers and male officers of misogyny and also sexual behaviour is zero tolerance. I see officers occasionally being arrested themselves and put before discipline panels and kicked out by chief constables, and rightly so. I want the police service to be a job that anyone that is able to join, because it is a fantastic job. It's not a great day at the office today, but we often have great days. Often we have very horrible days, violent days, and we have days where the police service get the worst press coverage that you can think of. But the times that the police officers risk their lives both men and women, to protect society and do an outstanding job, it's never news headlines. When they do something wrong, it's all over the front pages.
Norman Brennan is a former police officer with his view on this whole David Carrick case and how did the police miss a man who was a serial rapist for 20 years. Norman, thank you very much.
Yeah, we should flag, we've got Patsy Stevenson coming on the programme in around an hour's time. She, of course, is the woman who was out with many, many other women and men, it should be said, for a vigil for Sarah Everard and was manhandled by the police. You'll remember that famous picture. We'll be getting her views. Should women have come forward sooner in this case? Is there a touch of victim blaming in some of that rhetoric? We'll get her views a little bit later on in the show.
And also, as Norman Brennan was pointing out, and a number of you at home are saying, none of this, whatever Carrick or Wayne Couzens did, it doesn't automatically prove that every policeman is a rapist or abuser. And I think often watching these things, neither is every man in general. So many men are respectful towards women and are absolutely as appalled and hurt by this as anyone else. But there are these awful people, and we have to do everything we can that no one should be allowed to get away with a campaign, a brutal campaign of intimidation, of rape and of terror. And the thing is that a lot of his victims, he was picking up on dating apps. He was on this Tinder thing. And when you look at the dangers of something like that, I'm sure there's lots of lovely romances and whatever with Tinder and people who end up together. But my goodness me, how frightened are you? Let us know this morning as a woman, in case you end up with a David Carrick or a Wayne Couzens on your date. The time is 7:15.
Other big news today, teachers are now going to go on strike in England and Wales from the 1st of February. The National Education Union made the announcement yesterday.
Now, these walkouts by the UK's largest union will mean that GCSE pupils will have had just one year of uninterrupted learning over five years, OK? The diary editor of The Spectator, James Heal, is here with the repercussions of that. I mean, we can feel sorry for kids, but obviously there's always this false rhetoric that teachers are so essential to our lives and to our upbringing. We all have a special teacher and whatever it is. But if we don't cherish them, if we don't value them financially and culturally, no wonder they're going to strike.
Yes, this is one of the problems facing the country, long-term causes and then a short-term impetus. So we've had the effect of inflation on their pay, which is eating into that, but the long-term issues are about teacher retention here. A third of teachers leave within 5 years, 40% leave within 10 years. And I think because of those lack of teachers who were in that kind of £45,000 to £55,000 more established category, you therefore put more pressure on the newer teachers, and that's why a lot of them are leaving. And as a result of that, because there's a lack of vacancies, teachers don't feel supported, and that's why the result of the low pay and the high stress on their jobs, that's why they're walking out now.
You ask any parent, and indeed my own children adore their teachers in a way I don't think I did as a child. I mean, they genuinely love their teachers, and we all support what they do, and I have an undying respect for the work of teachers in my day-to-day life. And yet, it feels like a total tragedy that children who were locked out of schools for months and months during the lockdown are once again going to be forced out of the classroom. Yes, people should be allowed to strike. They should be allowed to down their tools. But should children be paying the price for this?
Well, this is the thing, and reading the papers today, there's a lot of talk about, again, returning to online learning and only lessons for those children of key workers, etc., the most vulnerable, those with issues, etc. And the danger is, because of that, is that you can see children miss out once again, making up with the backlog. I would say also with that backlog, because of COVID, it means that teachers have had to have additional pressures put on them in order to try and make up the workload, and that's leading to the stress that they're suffering.
And the life implications on children who miss classroom time. I mean, their prospects of success and wealth in life hugely detrimented by lack of time in the classroom.
Well, quite, and at least into existing inequalities, and you're seeing that also in terms of number of conditions, mental health problems, etc. And we're only going to be getting to grips with that in the next 5 to 10 years as we see the impact of that on the lockdown generation.
And nurses as well yesterday also voting to do more days on strike. Meanwhile, the government managing to get their second reading of this law to try and produce a minimum level of service. Labour very much, though, not in favour of it.
Yes, and we saw that in the angry scenes in the House of Commons yesterday between Grant Shapps and Angela Rayner, which were all about the whole issue of this, which is that Labour are saying that they want to stand up for workers' unions. The Conservatives are saying that they want to protect these 6 key sectors, such as health, nuclear workers, etc. They point point to countries that use such similar laws in France, for instance. But I think it shows that really there isn't going to be any kind of headroom in terms of going to the Lords and getting some resolution on this anytime soon.
Let's talk about the gender law that was blocked by Westminster but passed in Scottish Parliament. And Nicola Sturgeon calling it a full frontal attack on our democratically elected Scottish Parliament. This has just been a fuel to the fire, hasn't it, on Scottish independence?
It has. It's really interesting because actually the law isn't that popular in Scotland. Polling suggests 2-1 Scots are against it. So it's an interesting kind of battleground on which the SNP can wage this fight. In theory, of course, it's quite a niche thing about sort of trans rights legislation. But, of course, the consequences are that you could lead to fears about gender tourism, and therefore people could use gender recognition certificates south of the border. Equalities legislation is supposed to be UK-wide. And so it's something that's got very interesting ramifications. The Scottish Government said they're going to go to judicial review, and so it could be another issue thrashed out in the courts with interesting to see if it can energise the SNP's base.
OK, James Hill, thank you very much
Pleasure
indeed.
to see you.
With the time fast approaching 7:20, the top stories today are these. The Prime Minister's facing pressure from Conservative MPs to toughen up punishments for those who fail to protect children from online harm. Around 50 MPs have put their names to an amendment to the Online Safety Bill in an attempt to hold tech chiefs criminally liable if they do not block damaging content.
The inquest into 5 people shot dead in Plymouth last year will resume today. 22-year-old Jake Davison killed his mother Maxine after a row and then shot dead 4 others before turning the gun on himself.
Jeremy Clarkson has said he emailed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex on Christmas Day to apologise over his column in the Sun newspaper. However, a spokesperson for the couple said he did not address his long-standing pattern of spreading hate, rhetoric, dangerous conspiracy theories and misogyny. Latest unemployment figures have been just released. They show that unemployment rate remains stable at 3.7% in the 3 months to November.
Yes, we're seeing the redundancy rates increase to 3.4% per 1,000 employees, in September to November, but still remains low. And the figures also show that 417,000 working days were lost because of labour disputes in November 2022. That's the highest since 2011.
Jack Kennedy's with us now. Jack's an economist at Indeed Hiring Lab, and to explain what all of this means. Jack, what do you read into this?
Yeah, the labour market remains very tight, really. We've seen some further signs of softening. We saw vacancies coming down a little bit further. What do you mean when you
say the labour market remains tight?
The unemployment rate remains historically low. It has been increasing slightly from a low of 3.5%, but it remains at just 3.7%. And we've still got very strong labour demand. So a lot of companies, a lot of employers are still finding it quite tough to bring in the staff that they're looking for.
So that leads to inflation, that leads to having to pay for the people that you want.
That's right. And we're seeing quite strong rates of wage growth, nominal wage growth at 6.4% year on year, particularly in the private sector, running at 7.2% year on year, but in the public sector, just 3.3%. So one of the biggest gaps on record between private and public sector wage growth, which is obviously part of the background for a lot of the industrial action that we're seeing at the moment.
Interesting to distinguish between full-time and part-time employment. There seems to be this increase in part-time self-employed, but a decrease in full-time self-employed.
Yeah, so we are starting to see employers responding a little bit to the uncertain economic climate and sort of easing off the accelerator in terms of demand for full-time staff. But certainly, a lot of employers are trying to still fill staffing gaps. So certainly turning to part-time staff to
yeah,
help
so they want
that.
it all on the cheap, basically. So, I mean, a lot of this, is this not what Brexit promised, which is, to have basically, British jobs for British people?
Well, we're certainly seeing that a lot of sectors are struggling to bring in the staff in the context of freedom of movement from the EU having ended. So, it has been difficult for some time for a lot of employers to bring in that staff. On the positive side, we are seeing, since the change in the UK's immigration rules, increased interest from outside of the EU, but that's predominantly being directed towards the higher paid, higher skilled end of the labour market.
Well, you say that, but honestly, I mean, I would find if you go into a restaurant now, if you go into a health facility or hospital, anything now, you will find people from India, people from the Philippines, people from Africa. So basically, we're not deluding ourselves that, you know, we stop taking Polish people and Albanian people and Romanian people, and we simply substitute them with people from other parts of the country because, and there were people who will say, Brits don't want jobs that are low paid and they don't want hard work.
Well, I mean, we're seeing that a lot of the lower paid jobs have been amongst the ones seeing the fastest wage growth. So that's really been quite a defining feature of the UK labour market over the past 18 months to 2 years, really. We've seen a lot of demand across sectors like hospitality, retail, warehousing have really been having to ramp up pay to try and attract the staff that they need.
And what's been really interesting, and Eamonn talking about Brits don't want to work hard, I mean, we've got the biggest problem out of the G7 haven't we, of people getting back into work after the pandemic. And it's really interesting seeing what the government's been announcing recently to try and entice them back. So no national insurance for the first 6 months for anyone over 50, or if you're on disability allowance, don't worry, you can continue to receive a disability allowance whilst you're working. Major carrots there being offered by the government to try and get people back into the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly been one of the key factors holding back labour force participation is that withdrawal of older over 50s workers from active labour force participation. So certainly from a policymaker's perspective, trying to entice those people back is going to be key to addressing a lot of these long-standing hiring challenges for employers. But I think we're going to need a lot more also on the employers' front in terms of supporting and offering greater flexibility, because we know a lot of older workers want flexibility, including the ability to work remotely, but also around hours and shift patterns. So certainly employers are going to have to increasingly sort of step up.
I hear anybody who runs their own business says to me, who would be an employer? They find staff basically a pain in the backside. And the demands, but it's absolutely true. People don't want, people just want, oh, I'll do it, but I'll only do it on my terms and I'll only do it here and I'll only do it there and whatever. And the question I really want to get at is we say, OK, unemployment rates remain stable, 3.7%, but there's still 3.7% of the population out there who are not working, but there are jobs for them. Why are they not working? Why are they not in those jobs? Is that to do with pay and conditions?
Yeah, that's certainly part of the story. And I think one of the really interesting things this year is the extent to which, you know, in a more challenging economic climate, we've been in a period where workers have been having the whip hand in the labour market, really for the past 2 years or so. So the extent to which that balance of power potentially shifts back more in favour of employers, and candidates can't always, in such an environment, sort of dictate terms so much. That will be really interesting to see how that one really plays out.
Jack Kennedy, really appreciate your take on things. Thanks for your analysis there. Jack's an economist at Indeed Hiring Lab. Thank you. Thank you.
Jack. Stay with us after the break. All the sports for you with Paul Coit. See you in a sec.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness,
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
7:30 is the time. Still to come here on Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
At 8:15, we've got an appointment with the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan. This as teachers announce strikes that will affect over 23,000 schools and millions of children.
The Foreign Secretary is in America to urge Washington to step up its support for the war in Ukraine. We'll get the latest just before 8:30.
And you can join in any of our discussions. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yeah, or you can... And I was going to say, if you want a conversation, you can tweet me. Tweet at Eamonn Holmes. A look at the back pages. They shape up like this. A big headline in the Star, Ramalama Ding Dong, after the Tottenham forward Clarkson called the Arsenal goalkeeper Aaron Ramsdale disrespectful during the contentious aftermath. I think they meant the fight at the North London derby. I love this thing, respect. Footballers love this word, respect. Show me some respect, man. The Express, meanwhile, leads on the ruthless, what they term the ruthless England rugby coach Steve Borthwick, kicking 3 long-serving players from his squad. That's what managers do. The Metro leads on no time to buy after Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp reiterated his commitment to the club amid concerns his future and their January transfer activity. And on that transfer activity, Paul Coit with me now. Arsenal, a lot of headlines saying we want Rice. Arsenal chase West Ham star in club record summer deal.
Declan Rice. So I think it's pretty much known that Declan Rice isn't likely to stay at West Ham.
Yeah.
He's got a year left on his deal with the option. There's always this thing which is the option to stay, which the club would be crazy not to invoke that, which means that he would stay, and obviously they're more likely to get more money if they sell him. So it looks like the crunch time is going to be for him to leave West Ham in the summer. It seemed like he would be going to Chelsea, which was his boyhood club, played there up until he was 14. Mason Mount's his best mate. It just seemed that it was definitely done that he would be going to Chelsea. But now everybody and every paper's all over it. The fact that Arsenal are now interested, they're talking about £80 million for Declan Rice. And it's almost like well, you know, there's words that, you know, you're going to fit in perfectly with us. And, I mean, it would work very well for Arsenal. You know, he's a young player. He's just turned 24. It would fit in with their ethos, the way they're going.
It fit in anywhere,
whether
really. Yeah.
Declan Rice wants to go there, it's where Declan Rice wants to go. And I'm sure, I still think Chelsea will be the place.
There was a time where Man United would have been one of those destinations, but I think they've got themselves sorted out.
Look okay, yeah. I mean, they seems to be looking okay, but it's early days. This is not... We're in the January transfer window.
Yeah.
We're talking about the summer. So he's not going to be going anywhere now. This won't be until the summer.
It's summer in Australia.
It is.
The Australian Open is happening, and right now Andy Murray is on court. Tell us more.
OK, so Andy Murray, you know it's going to be a roller coaster with Andy Murray, don't you? It's never going to be just an easy win. It started off, he's playing Matteo Berrettini, who was semi-finalist at the Australian Open last year. 2 sets up. It looks fantastic. You know, Andy is 66th in the world, unseeded, so he's going in and he's obviously got to play a difficult player. So Berrettini wins the first 2 6-3, 6-3, and then in true Andy Murray style, then starts getting us on the edge of our seat, loses the 3rd set 6-4. He's lost the 4th set 7-6 to a tie-break, and now going into the final set, it's 4-4 and it's on a knife edge, and it wouldn't be any other way with Andy Murray.
Yeah,
So we'll have to see how that goes. 10-point tie-break. They have a 10-point tie-break in Australia.
We're not far off the Six Nations in rugby, and there's a lot of rugby news around the papers today. First of all, the England squad, the now England head coach, Steve Borthwick, he's making a few changes.
He has made changes. I mean, any coach, any new manager that goes in is always going to ring changes to wherever they go, whether it be football, whether it be rugby, doesn't matter. So you've got names like Billy Vunipola and Jack Noel and Johnny May. There's a lot of caps between them. They've been dropped. But, of course, in true manager style, he said, but the door is always open, Eamonn. You know, if you play well enough, you can get back. But it's all about pace, power, competitiveness, and that's what he wants in his squad.
Well, the former coach, Eddie Jones, he obviously thought the door was open. The exit door was always open, and he was taking precautions. So he's been appointed the new Australian coach. Yeah. And yet there's talk now that this was a long time in the planning.
It shouldn't really surprise anybody, though, should it? I mean, the way things were going with Eddie Jones with England, whenever the talk around the sack comes up, you've got to keep your options open. So whether it's right or whether it's wrong, I mean, Australia, he was the Australia coach in 2003. So when Australia lost the World Cup final to England. So there's always going to be talk around that. So basically, Eddie Jones... It's gone to Australia now, but the word is that they've been talking for about 14 months.
Right.
So, I mean, what's wrong with that? A little phone call to say, Eddie, just in case, just to let you know, could be trouble.
Now, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what's wrong with this, right? So, I don't know, folks, if we can see this. So we've got a camera on this, but basically what you're looking at here are strawberries. They're not just any strawberries. These are... white strawberries, right? So they're white strawberries, and they look as if they're dipped in white chocolate.
No, they look like they're not ripe. They've been taken off the branch.
Let me explain.
Okay.
Let me explain. Our producer Lucy, she likes her cuisine, and she was out shopping in M&S yesterday.
Right.
She came across white strawberries, right? So now we're going to teach... They look like sort of albino strawberries.
They do look like they could do it with a week in Tenerife.
Do you think that looks good? Do you think that looks good?
Well, at first I didn't know what they were, but, you know, it's a little bit of orange on there.
Folks, let's just bite in here and see. Do not put you off the fact that the colour...
Delicious.
They're a bit watery, aren't they?
They're delicious, but my brain's saying this is fake. My brain's saying it doesn't look right and it doesn't taste natural.
I'm with you.
Although it tastes sweet and delicious, but has it been augmented?
There's not a lot of strawberries. You know, there's some fruit makes me make a face. Do you have that when you bite in and all of a sudden you go like that?
Yeah.
And this is not making me make a face, which is a good thing, but I'm not really getting much taste either, to be honest with you.
I'm thinking chocolate.
You're wishing for chocolate.
I'm thinking Milky Bar.
Oh, yeah.
But this is really nice.
You like it? Well, there's a bowl there for you. It's breakfast sorted.
Strawberry.
Go on,
white strawberry.
It's OK, but would you like to finish mine just in case?
Oh, no. We don't do double dipping.
You don't do that? Just
No.
in case. OK, I thought we were friends.
Well, listen, I think we should go to a commercial break so we can finish off these strawberries, these white strawberries, and then we'll be back to the newspapers after this.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations. for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 7:41. Let's bring you up to date with the front pages of the newspapers. They're shaping up like this.
The Telegraph leading with the police commissioner's apology after a serving Metropolitan officer was discovered as a serial rapist.
The Guardian also featuring PC David Carrick and his brutal campaign of rape and terror.
And the Express asks how the police missed the serial rapist over 20 years, and that's the big question and the big concern. I think we've got to have a word. This is in all the newspapers. That's the Times talks about the
mass
teachers,
walkout. Unions. Teachers have decided that they will be walking out. And the Mirror says that paying tribute to actress.
Actress what? You wanted to continue. Can you not speak Italian? I thought you were multilinguist.
Lola Brigida.
No, Gina Lollobrigida.
Okay.
And anyway, a beautiful, beautiful woman, very talented actress, and there she is. She died yesterday at the age of 95. Guys, we just got to talk first of all about that headline over all the front of the newspapers, Claire, about this awful, hideous monster, David Carrick.
The more you read about his litany of crimes, it just makes you wonder what on earth the police force were doing. why was this never picked up? And this is the one thing I can't believe, and all of the papers have the story, and it just gets worse every time you read it. And safety of women has been an issue now for a couple of years. It's been brought to the fore for the Sarah Everard murder, which was an appalling crime. And when you find out that this particular officer was at the same time, served in the same unit, although allegedly didn't know David Carrott, they didn't know each other, but it's the same unit.
Claire, could I ask you and Isabel, would you would you deal with police now differently than, say, Norman and I might as a result of these stories?
I think you are always going to be cautious. I think it is going to affect the instances that you have contact with the police, for sure. Absolutely is. I had a meeting locally with police on Friday, and they were 2 female officers. And that made me feel better. And it shouldn't. It shouldn't make a difference. They are serving police officers. They are all trained. But it is, and I suddenly realised how much this had affected me, and I hadn't actually thought about it until that point.
Right, OK, let's move on to other stories. We've got in The Sun, Norman, this is a big one, a national security bill. You're worried about this. Why are you worried about this?
Well, I'm worried because, as a Liberal, one of the things which motivates me is the balance of power between the state and the individual. And it seems to me what we're going through is authoritarianism from the government in a number of regards. They're making the right to strike ineffective. They're making it ineffective to demonstrate, preventing demos in some cases and limiting them on others. And we've got now this national security bill, which I'm familiar with, which is going to prevent matters which we think we, as a public, I think, ought to be known about, from being known about. And congratulations to the Sun for running it. It says, for example, should we know that the security service at Heathrow recently seized a potentially deadly shipment of uranium being smuggled into the UK? Yes, we should know that. It says, should we be permitted to know that the British Secret Service MI5 used a foreign undercover agent after he violently and sexually assaulted his British partner and told her she'd be killed by men in high places, a bit like the police. Should we know that? Yes, we should know that. And the danger with this bill is that it's going to clamp down on the release of information. And when you bring in extra powers for the police or the security services, you have to bring in safeguards in parallel. And they haven't done that. So one of the things I'm working on behind the scenes with others is to try to make sure there's a public interest defence. Yes. So that people can whistleblow if they absolutely have to do so.
So why is there this move to tighten things up, to be more secretive?
Well, do you know, I think it's down to the Home Secretary and her team, largely, because when I got to the Home Office, I was told by the Permanent Secretary there are 2 sorts of Home Secretaries. There are authoritarian Home Secretaries and there are libertarian Home Secretaries. And it's not a party thing, because you get someone like David Blunkett, who was quite authoritarian, and Charles Clark for Labour was very libertarian. And similarly, you had to Amber Rudd, who I think was quite libertarian, and Priti Patel and Salal Bravman are not. So that's a dividing line in the Home Office. And we're going down this road where the power of the state is being increased at the expense of the power of the individual. And this is important because...
Okay, go on, because I wanted to pick you up, because you're making that point about the strikes, and you were saying that, you know, this is clamping down on people's effective right to strike. But when you were talking about the situation in Scotland, and this is on the gender law, you were saying, why should one particular law in one area infringe laws in another area? Because, of course, the Gender Equality Act is not devolved. But let me just bear with me, trying to explain my point very badly here. You know, on one side of the argument, you're saying they shouldn't infringe on rights. On the other hand, you're saying, well, OK, they should be allowed to strike at any cost, at the cost to patients, at the cost to children.
I wouldn't say they'd strike at any cost. But the point about Scotland was the constitutional point as to whether or not what Scotland's done influences UK legislation by the back door. That's the issue there.
But with the strikes, the government are saying clearly, aren't they, that the right to strike is sacrosanct, but it's not absolute.
Well, they're saying it's sacrosanct, but it isn't. I mean, that's... Look, let me go back to the 1930s in Germany. I don't want to be over dramatic about this, but there was a pastor Niemöller in the 1930s said, they came for the Jews and I was not a Jew, so I did nothing. They came for the trade unionists and I was not a trade unionist, I did nothing. They came for the homosexuals, I was not homosexual, I did nothing. And when they came for me, there was no one to speak out for me. This is the danger. You've got to allow people in a democracy to protest, even if it's inconvenient for other people. You've got to allow that. And the government is making it much more difficult for people to protest. Of course, we don't want strikes. We don't want services to interfere. But when you want to strike about something or you want to be in a demo, you have to be able to do so.
Norman, can I say, totally get what you're saying here, but are we not a conservative country by nature? and that, you know, people watching this programme today will say, well, absolutely, absolutely, security and safety and law and order must come first.
Law and order has to be very important, but law and order, we came back to discussion about this corrupt offensive police officer. You have to have consensus policing. You have to have consensus. You have to believe that security services and the police are acting in the public interest. And the way you do that is to make them accountable. And this law here, which the Sun refers to, makes them less accountable.
Yeah, safeguarding can never be a bad thing, absolutely, when it's protecting freedom.
Well, is it a bad thing, Claire? This is a very interesting story you've picked out in the Times. The Home Office has told its staff to avoid language which would be gendered. So, for instance, I don't know if this would be regarded as gender. If I said to you and Isabel, hey guys, do you fancy going out for a bit of breakfast later? So is guys, have I called you two guys, or would it be worse if I called you mate?
Well, according to the Home Office, mate is not to be used. The Home Office are keen to stress that this was an internal document, it's not government policy. But it just highlights, I think, how concerned the Home Office is with such things and how offended people seem to have become. I mean,
are you saying easily offended?
I am saying easily offended. If somebody calls me mate, I might look at them in a certain way because I'm not their mate, but I wouldn't be offended by it. I've heard worse during my time in the House of Commons, I can tell you that. But it's things like not using the word homosexual or homosexuality. But that's a word, a descriptor, everybody knows what it means. I don't see how that can be offensive.
Somebody who's homosexual, if not homosexual?
I don't know, because you're not also allowed to use the word gay lifestyle. So I'm not sure what it is they want people to refer to.
And this is where a lot of people, particularly older people, get very confused when it comes to language dealing with ethnicity, for instance.
And that's right. And I think this is where people get tied up in knots and they are worried about saying the wrong thing. And race is one of those issues. If you look back at words that we used 20, 30 years ago, we would shudder, but at the time were deemed acceptable, and people have to learn what the word is and what people want to be referred as. And I think this is a really dangerous path to go down if you're going to stop staff from using those kind of words. Something like mate in an email, well, OK, it's probably not the best word that you can use for somebody who actually isn't your friend, but I don't think it's offensive. I think that using the wrong pronoun is also not offensive because it is a confusing issue. The whole trans debate is very, very complicated and really very toxic, and nobody wants to offend. Everybody wants people to be respected.
Some people do want to offend.
I want to, but I think the majority don't.
I get this whole thing that you can't have enemies. I think if you don't have enemies, you must be a really boring person.
How do you learn?
I personally just think the Home Office should be focusing on more serious matters.
Well,
yes.
Absolutely.
Quite frankly.
Yes, but the thing is, generally, and you're making this point, I mean, I come in here, I had a talk with a producer today, and he refers to, and it's a generational thing, everybody is referred to by their first name. And then Claire's going to do this, and then Claire who? Claire who? You know, we get so many guests today. I'm trying to think which Claire or who's that going to be. Whereas I'm from a generation where everybody was called by their surname, or you give someone their full name and their title. Claire Purcell, who's a former Conservative advisor. You know, yeah, I get that. Claire who? Claire in the office, Claire who works in the canteen, Claire who, you know...
No, I understand that. And coming from the House of Commons, we use everybody's surname, which is a little bit like a sort of boys' prep school, but the House of Commons really hasn't moved on that far. And you use people's surnames the whole time. Now, in other sectors, that would be decreed as pretty offensive.
Almost,
and abusive and not correct, especially towards women. Whereas that's kind of the culture that we work in, and I'm not offended. It is my surname, so therefore, if you want to call me that,
this thing, you know,
go ahead.
Women in general are much stronger than a lot of people, and much more robust than a lot of people sort of make out. Don't ever call her guy or mate or anything, because, you know, she...
Well, I'm sure if you said something to Isabel that she didn't like, she would tell you.
Have I ever?
Oh, I've told you. I've told you. Can we talk about the danger of rail crossings, Norman?
Yes, I don't mind being called mate. My best friend in America, who's female, calls me mate all the time.
I've got girlfriends that call each other mate.
Yeah,
Mate.
There you go. Yeah, this is a story which is about this dreadful company which has now gone into liquidation, thank goodness.
We've got 30 seconds.
OK, which has been calling 1.5 million spam calls a day, and the consequence of doing that is snagged up network rail systems so people couldn't actually phone through with rail safety issues to do with level crossings. It's quite shocking, but why are we getting 1.5 million spam calls a day from this company?
Yeah, and somebody might die as a result
Absolutely.
of that. I know someone who was killed on a level crossing.
you?
Yeah, absolutely. Terrible, terrible. We've got white strawberries. Can we quick snap
white
the
strawberry.
White strawberries. We were talking
Pass
about
them
these
down
earlier.
the line, have a strawberry.
So Claire, genuinely sink your
Go on,
teeth
have another
into
one. You
there.
love them.
And what do you think, Claire?
It's very, very, very sweet.
It is, isn't it?
It's
like
a really odd
sweetie.
texture.
It's a
Pineapple.
watery texture.
Why are they white?
I don't know.
Genetically modified, I
But
assume.
somebody find out why they're white.
Rotten.
Maybe that's a natural thing. Maybe
Yeah,
that
they've
is.
been picked a bit early on.
Maybe they're just burnt in the sun or something like that.
We say goodbye to Claire Pissell, Norman Baker. Thank you very much for everything, including your analysis of the strawberries. We'll have more for you after the break, including the latest on the Metropolitan Police's latest scandal. See you in a second.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McKibben. It's a freezing start out there. Widespread frost up and down the country. Icy patches in the north and the northwest, and in some places further snow expected through the rest of the day. But the snow is very hit and miss at the moment. It's coming in on a north to northwesterly wind, and so it's windward coasts predominantly that are seeing the snow showers. And with good shelter, inland and southeastern parts of the UK, just seeing sunny skies as we start the day. Perhaps a few fog patches. They'll be slow to clear, but otherwise plenty of crisp winter sunshine. However, some icy patches to watch out for in the southwest, across parts of Wales, northwest England, Northern Ireland and northern Scotland. And in the northwest, we're going to continue to see these showers coming in. Mostly these showers are sleet and snow, but for the Northern Isles, something a little milder starts to mix in, so rain showers more likely as we end the afternoon. But here, it will turn increasingly windy. Those winds strengthening to gale force, bringing a spell of more persistent rain and sleet at lower levels and snow over the hills, blizzard conditions by evening across higher parts of northern Scotland, and drifting of snow. Showers also piling into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales and the west of England overnight. And widely, wherever you are, another frosty night. I think with a bit more of a breeze, temperatures not falling quite as far, but still a frosty start as we begin Wednesday. Another bright start, though, in the south and the east particularly, plenty of sunshine. And in the north, we'll see the area of more persistent rain, sleet and snow move into eastern Scotland and push into northeast England through the day. So some snow building up over the hills of northern England and eastern Scotland. Northern Ireland also seeing further showers, as well as Wales and the southwest. Again, a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and snow. But away from these areas, sunny spells. And then on Thursday, the showers become more confined to eastern parts of the UK. Western areas seeing plenty of sunny skies, but it does stay cold. Temperatures only slowly coming up on Friday and the weekend.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The Metropolitan Police plunged into crisis as an armed officer is revealed to be one of the country's worst serial rapists.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday the 17th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, the Metropolitan Police is facing calls for urgent reform after one of its officers pleaded guilty to committing over 76 attacks over 18 years, including 24 rapes.
Teachers are to strike in England and Wales from the 1st of February. This is after a decision by the National Education Union. The walkouts will mean GCSE pupils will have had just 1 year of uninterrupted learning.
The Prime Minister has blocked Scotland's controversial gender recognition bill, with the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon calling it a full frontal attack on the Scottish Parliament. The move by the government represents the first time Scottish legislation has been stopped by Westminster.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have accused Jeremy Clarkson of hate rhetoric. It comes after the TV personality issued a second public apology for a column he wrote about hating Meghan Markle.
Get in touch, tweet me directly at Eamonn Holmes if you would like to. Otherwise, it's you can email GB Views, I don't know because the audio...
At GB News is on the screen there, at gbnews.uk.
Very good.
And lots of you have been getting in touch on the Metropolitan Police story this morning. Dee in Hampshire says, unfortunately, even with the most rigorous vetting, there will always be rogue individuals amongst thousands in any employment. What is vital is that people are on their guard and do everything that's possible to root them out. It is impossible to know what is going on secretly in every individual's brain. My question is it good enough to say, well, there'll always be bad apples, there's bad apples everywhere? Or do we have to ask, are bad apples attracted to the fact that they can have this huge amount of power over incredibly vulnerable people at often the worst times in their lives? And I do think it's no excuse to say it's just a percentage of the population will always be bad.
Yeah, but also, as you say, power has a lot to do with this. And this guy, he just knew he had power, and he was able to say to all his victims, cry if you want to, complain if you want to, but I'm a police officer and you're not. Who are they going to believe, you or me? Those are the words of this horrible, ghastly man, David Carrick.
Yeah, and we have a psychologist coming on just after 9 o'clock, actually, to give their take on exactly what it is about somebody in this kind of position of power that sort of leads to this kind of horrendous
his
exploitation.
whole thing, Isabel, was
degrading people.
Degrading. There was a humiliation associated with the people that he hooked up with, and he was using dating apps and things. And initially, it may have seemed attractive, his position, his job, what he did. And he was in the Diplomatic Protection Corps as well, but it was abusive. It was all abusive, you know.
Yeah, well, Martin says the Met Police became politicised and has a weak senior management structure. It needs a strong, independent disciplinary body, which it does not have now. We also had an email a little bit earlier on in the programme about somebody alleging that there was a real problem with secret organisations like the Masons within the police that actually led to cover-ups.
Yeah.
Obviously, haven't been able to stand that up, but an interesting take on all of that from a former serving officer.
Well, we were told after Wayne Couzens this was a one-off, this would never happen again, and here we are. Now, earlier we spoke to Norman Brennan. Norman is a former police officer. He called this whole case abhorrent. He said more reform was needed within the police.
The thing about police officers that commit these types of crimes are they are very good at hiding them. And when you're good at hiding them, it's pretty much like when you're recruited as a police officer. You may be an exemplary character, yet 5 or 10 years down the road, you turn rogue. We've got to look at recruiting, we've got to look at vetting, and we've got to make sure that supervisors and senior officers within the police have got a grip on frontline officers.
To give us her thoughts is women's rights activist Patsy Stevenson, whose image went viral during the Sarah Everard vigil after she was held prostrate, or down on the ground, I should say, by police officers during what was a peaceful protest. Good morning, good to see you. Welcome to the programme. First of all, just your initial reaction when the news broke to this yesterday.
I mean, it's devastating, isn't it, that it's happening again? And I think what we need to remember as well, this is one that's come into the public eye, but there are so many incidences like this, and it's been going on for years and years and years. And I just feel like, how bad does it need to get for people to realise this needs to change urgently, you know?
Yeah, the Metropolitan Police already in special measures. As you say, they've already had all of this sort of self-reflection and remorse in the wake of Wayne Couzens, and yet here we are again talking about another heinous incident. And we're told by the Commissioner, Mark Rowley, that there will be more incidents like this because at the moment he is currently investigating 1,000 serving officers along the lines of domestic violence, sexual offences, including rape at the moment. Do women have justification to be nervous when they're dealing with the police in London?
Most definitely. I mean, I think we have for years, we've been justified in worrying about this. I used to trust the police. You know, women want to be able to trust police because who are we supposed to go to? But time and time again, they're showing us that we can't trust them. And saying sorry, but not changing the behaviour, the apology just feels absolutely like there's no point in it. There's no point in apologising if you're not going to change what's happening.
I've heard some people claiming that the victims in this took their time to come forward, that they were hesitant in coming forward, a kind of implication, therefore, that the victims were some way to blame. What's your take on that?
I mean, victim blaming is never okay, but can you imagine, why would you come forward straight away? Because this has happened to myself. You know, if I came forward about a death threat that happened to me and the police just didn't take it seriously, and it's still nothing has happened from it because they just don't take women seriously enough. So of course you're going to be hesitant about something like that. And I feel really bad for like the victims of this abuse. I just don't know when it's going to end, you know?
Absolutely devastating for the victims in all of this, and hugely brave of them to have come forward as they did whenever they felt it was the right time to do that. The tragedy in it all was that it was reported 9 times and lots of signs were missed.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that a lot of times everyone's like, oh, it's one bad apple that ruins the bunch, and they know, like the people around these abusers, they know what they're like, they do. And it's not just, oh, they're a bit misogynistic, it's just banter, it's just this. You cannot be abusing women and nobody know about it. Someone's got to know this stuff. They knew 9 times it was flagged and nothing happened. So that leads me to believe that there are more police, and to be honest, I worry about the fact that why aren't they suspending these police straight away? Is it the fact that if they did, they would end up with no police left?
It's interesting to see what goes on in the States as trust is lost in the police. I suppose it's a real warning to us here in the UK about what can happen if there is corruption, if there is misbehaviour within police ranks, because you see these huge movements calling for the defunding of the police, which in itself hugely problematic as well. Do you worry about the direction of travel, of how law and order can be sustained in this country when its public confidence is at an all-time low?
Well, see, I used to fully believe that there was no way you could abolish the police. It didn't make sense in my mind, because who do you go to when there's a crime? It seemed like you need police. But the more and more I've learnt about it, the more abolition seems to be the only safe, acceptable thing to do. So I'm worried, and I really hope that the police start from scratch. You know, start from scratch, tear the whole thing down and start again, because we're leading to a place where it's so unsafe for women. It's so unsafe for women, and I don't see it getting any better.
Patsy Stevenson, whilst I've got you, I have to ask you about the Public Order Bill amendments being made in government. They are hoping to make it more clear to police officers exactly how they can police public order events, like the vigil that you attended in Sarah Everard's honour. What's your view on that?
So I'm actually speaking soon to the House of Lords because of this. The Public Order Bill, very much like the policing bill, it affects all of us. And this report has come out. Police are abusing powers, and the Public Order Bill gives them more powers. Why would you give more powers to police in this state? The issue that we've got as well is that people like myself, I'll most likely either be put on a tag or thrown in prison because I've been arrested in the past 5 years, even though it was an unlawful arrest. So the Public Order Bill will affect everyone. It's completely detracting everyone's right to freedom of speech, to protest. And I'm not just talking about like one side politically, it's everyone. If you ever want to protest about anything, you're not going to be allowed to by law.
OK, Patsy Stevenson, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
We're going to continue this subject. We head to southwest London. Our national reporter Paul Hawkins is there as a misconduct hearing is due to take place. And Paul, bring us things from your end. Tell us more.
Yeah, so 9 o'clock this morning, we're going to have David Carrick's misconduct hearing. This part of an accelerated disciplinary process after what he'd been doing came to light. Look, it's going to be a formality. It shouldn't take too long. Suffice to say, he will be sacked given what has happened. But really, that's not the end of it at all. We've heard that Mark Rowley, the Met Police Commissioner, saying that there will be hundreds of other officers that simply shouldn't be working in the force as they undertake Operation Onyx. That's a review of all 45,000 serving staff and officers to go back and review their history and their case files. And he says that the majority of them will simply be, and especially in these cases, these 1,000 cases of domestic and sexual violence that you've been talking about on the programme that cover 800 officers, you know, a lot of them may be just simply neighbours that have heard an argument next door, but there will be some that need reviewing and some officers that will need to be removed from the force. So this isn't the end of it by any stretch. And while the scale and severity of what potentially officers in future will have done may not match what David Carrick's done, it still makes uncomfortable reading for the Met as they try to close that gap that exists between what they say they're doing and what they're actually doing. When after the Sarah Everard murder, they said that they were going to reassure women that trust was going to be rebuilt, that they would protect women. And at the same time, by their own admission, the Professional Standards Unit didn't look into the file of David Carrick, who was facing an allegation of rape at the time. And that gap is the trust that not only the public have in the police force, but also women.
Thanks very much indeed. We'll leave it there. 12 minutes past 8. Teachers are going to strike in England and Wales from the 1st of February. The National Education Union, they're the union involved in this one, and the walkout is by the UK's largest education union, and it'll mean that GCSE pupils will have had just 1 year of interrupted learning in their time at secondary school.
Well, for the latest, we can bring in our national reporter, Ellie Costello, who's outside the National Education Union headquarters. Bring us up to date then on where they were at the threshold for balloting in all of this, because it was sort of 53% in favour of action, was it not?
Yes, very tight, actually. Good morning to you, Isabel and Eamonn. Yes, homeschooling could return as quickly as next month. That's after the National Education Union has voted to strike over pay. 7 days of strike action planned for February and March is going to affect over 23,000 schools in England and Wales. Now, over 90% of teachers voted yes to strike action, but as you just mentioned there, Isabel, only 53% turnout, but that did meet the legal threshold of 50% in order for the ballot to go ahead. Will schools close? Well, inevitably some will, but the onus will be on the head teachers to try and keep the schools open as best they can. But of course, if many teachers in one school are striking, then it may not be possible. And teachers do say that the infrastructure is at least in place to allow pupils to be homeschooled by their parents. Now, the national strikes are expected to take place on the 1st of February and the 15th and 16th of March. And there will also be regional dates in there as well, so a total of 7 days. But the NEU, which I'm standing outside now, they've said that any one school will only be affected by a maximum of 4 dates of strike action. Now, teachers in England and Wales will be joining teachers in Scotland who have been striking since before Christmas in a walkout over pay. And just to understand the context of all of this, teachers in England and Wales were actually given a pay rise of 5% in 2022, but the NEU says that that rise is nowhere near in line with inflation. And I was talking to a teacher last night who explained to me that that 5% pay rise came out of a pre-existing school budget. So she said it only actually negatively impacts on the children because the school is dealing with the rise in energy bills alongside many other things. And she was explaining to me that there are teachers in her school who are having to skip meals and sell their cars even to pay their rent. Now, the NEU say they're particularly concerned about recruitment. They're struggling to get teachers in things like maths and science, and also retaining staff as well. So that's what teachers are saying. But for parents and pupils, they're saying education is disrupted yet again. If you were a GCSE student, then you have only had 1 year of undisrupted learning in your secondary school experience. And of course, they will be concerned about what this means for their upcoming exam results. The Children's Commissioner for England, Rachel D'Souza, has said that this is the wrong course of action and it's damaging to children's outcomes. Well, this comes as the minimum service bill has actually passed its first hurdle in Parliament. That could mean there needs to be a minimum level of workers that continue to work throughout a strike, but that's not set to become law until later this year, so it won't have any impact on this latest disruption this winter.
OK, Ellie, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining us in the studio now is political correspondent Tom Harwood. Tom, I won't talk more about the strikes with you because we've got the Education Secretary in a minute and I don't want to overwhelm our viewers with the non-stop talk of school strikes, but I do really want to talk to you about this gender identification bill, the reforms that were passed by Scottish Parliament, blocked by Westminster and have thrown fuel on the independence fire, haven't they?
Certainly, and we're expecting a statement from Alistair Jack, the Secretary of State for Scotland, a little bit later, perhaps this morning, explaining exactly what the legal mechanism and the legal reasoning behind using what's called Section 35 of the Scotland Act, a mechanism that has never been used before in the history of devolution, although the proponents of it say it was included in the devolution settlement for a reason. This is about when devolved legislation has conflict with UK legislation. And the argument that the UK government has is that GRA reform in Scotland impacts upon the Equality Act 2010, which is UK-wide legislation.
Right, so when you have two laws conflicting, then obviously it overrides, the UK one overrides the Scottish one. Nicola Sturgeon saying this is a full frontal attack on our democratically elected Scottish Parliament. And whether or not people in Scotland care about trans rights or women's rights, what they won't like is seeing Westminster interfering on things that have been approved in the Scottish Parliament.
Certainly, it's a very difficult thing because in the Scottish Parliament, this had an overwhelming amount of support. It wasn't just the SNP that voted for it, the Greens voted for it, the Labour Party voted for it, the Lib Dems voted for it. It was only the Scottish Scottish Conservatives that in the round voted against it. And clearly the government has been wrestling over this question for some time. Of course, it passed the Scottish Parliament a number of weeks ago. The deadline in terms of whether or not the UK government could strike it down is this Wednesday. So they left it really quite late. They said they've been looking at legal advice and exploring what their lawyers have been saying about the potential conflicts that might exist between Scottish legislation and UK-wide legislation. It has to be said, though, we haven't yet seen the detail of that. And it's interesting to hear from the Labour Party this morning. They have not announced whether or not they support the government using Section 35 or not. They say they want to wait and see what that legal advice was, and perhaps we'll hear more from the Secretary of State for Scotland later today on that.
Interesting. Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed.
We say goodbye to Tom. We say hello, good morning, to the Education Secretary, the Secretary of State, Gillian Keegan, now this morning. Secretary of State, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good. Secretary of State, school days for you. We're going to start talking about this teacher strike. Was it good memories for you at St Thomas Becket School?
Yeah, I love school. It was quite a tough school, but my best friends that I still have, I met at that school. So yeah, very fond memories of school. Yeah, and the reason I'm talking about that, we all have teachers who had influences on our lives, and you know, in my autobiography, I devoted quite a lot to a primary school teacher, and I could have done the same when it came to secondary school as well. They're so important, they're so integral in all our lives. And here's the question from me to you, because you know, you are the boss, you are the Education Secretary. How do you put a price on that? That's the question. Teachers are there out day in, day out, all across our country, literally changing children's lives, inspiring them as well as educating them. So they just do the most amazing job. Every single one of us will have a teacher who has given us that light bulb moment, or given us confidence at a vital time, or even led us onto a path and guided us onto a path. And I had Mr. Ashcroft at my school, who I talk about regularly, who was just an amazing teacher. And there are so many amazing teachers, brilliant teachers across our country. And, you know, our children need them. That's why we want them in school. And it is disappointing that one of the unions, just one of the unions, has narrowly voted to take strike action. But of course, what we need to do now is work with head teachers and others who will still be in schools to try and keep as many of our schools open as possible for as many of our kids as possible.
Yes, because it is the largest education union and millions of children will be affected. And it beggars belief, does it not, that once again children will be closed out of the classroom. As you say, lots of people love their teachers. Lots of people won't blame the unions in all of this. They'll blame the government. They'll blame you, the Education Secretary.
Well, possibly, but if you look at the across the piece, there is only one union that's gone out. So there's many, the two head unions, the other teaching union and the teaching assistant union. Well, the ballots, they didn't meet the, they didn't have enough people who met the
Well, there were
threshold.
problems with the postal
so they have
service,
closed
according
their
to
ballots.
some of the unions as well.
This was a 3-month ballot, so 3 months is quite a long time, and many teachers will tell you they were getting many text messages and many sort of messages from the unions. So over 3 months, I think it's a reasonable time to conduct a ballot.
Secretary of State, could you explain the funding model to our viewers and listeners? Because a lot of people will think it's in your remit to write the cheque. But that is not the way it's funded, and it's particularly cruel, maybe, the way it's funded, because if you want to give teachers a pay rise, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's got to come out of an existing school budget. So maybe you have to dispense with a classroom assistant or a school trip or certain facilities within the school or repairs to the school. But if you want to pay teachers more, that comes out of an existing budget. Is that the way it is?
No. So what we have, first of all, is we have an independent pay review body that we are one of the consultees, but there's about 7 or 8, 9, I think, in total, including the unions, including the employers. So we all put together our submission, and we input that, and then they will look at several things: retention, recruitment, how many people, other jobs, what's happening in the private sector. So they'll do an analysis, and then they'll come out with a figure. We accepted that figure in full, which is 5% for new teachers and 8.9% for experienced teachers, and that's just on the pay bands. Also, what you have within teaching many of our public sector, you have progression pay as well, so based on time or based on promotion within a band. So if you take almost all newly experienced teachers and about 40% of experienced teachers, they'll be getting up to 15.9% when you put the progression pay in as well as the pay award. Now, in terms of funding it, there was a concern from schools and from unions that the pay award, which was higher than schools had budgeted, was not fully funded. So one of the first things I had to do when I started the role on the 25th of October, I had a letter from all the unions saying to fund this pay rise going forward, and also to make sure schools can manage with the cost of living impacts, we need an extra £2 billion next year and the year after. So that was the challenge they gave me, and that is what we delivered in the autumn statement. So it is so disappointing, because we worked very hard. We were one of the very few departments to actually get additional funding to make sure that we didn't have head teachers having to make those type of choices. And of course now we have still one union who is now putting our children's education and recovery after the pandemic at risk, and it's really, really disappointing.
But it's not just about pay, this whole issue for teachers, is it? It's also about retention. Now, you must have been delighted when the Prime Minister said just last week or the week before that education was one of the reasons that he went into politics. Front and centre of his ambitions, he wants to see maths up until 18. But you can't get the teachers. I think it's about a third of teachers are gone within 5 years of qualifying. And Mary Boustard, who is from this union that you're referring to, the NE union, she says that for a teacher who joined in 2010, they lost £64,000 in real terms since 2010. It's not an attractive proposition.
I mean, you can talk about additional funding, but if it's not enough funding, are you basically saying then that these teachers are being unreasonable, or that they're not worth what they're asking?
Well, first of all, could I say thank you to all of the teachers, and particularly those that have not voted to go on strike, which is many of them. But we have to... well, first of all, I don't think those figures take the progression into account, but the retention and recruitment is very much a concern. So we actually developed a retention recruitment strategy in 2019 for implementation in 2021, and it really... Well, it's only just been implemented, 2021, and actually it is working. We actually had, I think it's 36,300 was the lowest leaving rate, second lowest, I think, last year since 2010. So, we have to look at the facts. Look across the country. I was the Apprenticeships and Skills Minister before. I don't think I met an area, a sector, a business that wasn't struggling to recruit or retrain, and that's because of the pandemic, the disruption in the labour market from the pandemic, and the disruption from some people leaving the labour market in their 50s, maybe retiring early, many of them public sector workers. So we do need to focus on that. But the main thing we're doing as part of this strategy is we're supporting teachers much more in the first 2 years when they start usually straight from uni, with a mentor, with training, with development. They're getting much more support in the classroom. So that strategy, which was put together, and the unions and everybody else worked on that, we think will work, but of course it needs to be given some time to work. But the real problems are not in particular for this sector. They're across many of the labour market sectors, and they're due to the disruption from the pandemic. The other thing we agreed to do, and it was in our manifesto, was to raise the starting salary for newly qualified teachers, usually coming straight from uni, to £30,000. So it's £28,000 at the moment, and we will meet that commitment. It will be £30,000 by September next year when the new pay rises come in. So it is something we really focused on, and you don't need to strike to get my attention to solve any of these issues. Of course, we want to make sure teachers feel supported. We want to do more on workload. We want to do more on flexibility. We want to make their lives more fulfilled and easier.
So retention,
but,
and valuing...
Striking is not a way to do that.
Right, and the way you're talking there, you seem quite conciliatory. Do you think that there is a solution to this? Do you think that you can sort this pretty quickly?
Well, it's hard when you've got those kind of figures. You know, we have tried to do everything possible to get additional funding to be able to support the independent pay review claims and also to look at how we can work together for next year. So right now we're all putting together our submissions for next year's pay, which all have to be submitted by the 27th of January.
Okay.
So we've been working together to try and have those open conversations. But we do need to understand what the issue is here. The issue is inflation. So that's why the Prime Minister's been really focused on halving inflation. That's where we need to tackle the problem.
And we've talked about that a lot this morning, and I'm sorry to cut across you, but I know we're limited for time, and we have made that point this morning. I just want to ask you very quickly about our top story this morning. It's across all of the front pages of the paper, this heinous case of PC David Carrick, and I just want to ask you whether or not you think the Metropolitan Police is still fit for purpose.
Well, it's an appalling case and actually deeply, deeply shocking. And clearly they have to review what's happening to make sure that we don't have police officers who fall so far seriously below the standard that's required and is expected of our police. And it must be awful for police officers. Most police officers are fantastic, and it must be really awful for them as well. But I know the Met Police will be working on making sure that they improve their processes, and I think they've referred themselves to the independent police body as well.
Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
We'll say goodbye to you.
Thank you.
Dismissed. Class dismissed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We'll take a break there. After that, the latest from Ukraine as the Foreign Secretary urges America to step up support.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Just getting reaction in on the teacher strike. Eunice, Rosemary, Alan and Nath, basically people aren't too impressed by this. Cheryl says, it's time to knock things back into the groove. When I taught, that was what was required to do. I was not required to be a care worker, social worker, babysitter, police officer, etc. as well. I was there to teach. It's time to take the pressure off teachers. So that's the argument in support.
There was also
teachers.
an interesting point about contributions to pensions being much better for teachers than they are for people in the private sector. I think Gillian Keegan, on an online article I read earlier, said 23.6% is the pension contribution paid in by employers. Half of the private sector receive less than 4% into their pension. And also, let's not forget, they have huge amounts of summer holidays. I'm not saying they don't work hard, I'm not saying they shouldn't be valued, but it's all things to throw into the melting pot when weighing up the issue. Now, let's talk about Ukraine, shall we? The Foreign Secretary is in America today to meet with the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken.
The trip forms part of a diplomatic blitz by the government to step up global support for Ukraine. Let's go to the Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor of the Daily Telegraph, Clarkson, on this one. Con, good morning to you.
Good morning.
James Cleverly in Washington... I'm sitting thinking him and his 14 tanks, that's not going to end the war. How impressive is that contribution?
Well, it's a move in the right direction, Eamonn. As you say, a squadron of British tanks is not going to win the war, but it does send a message to our allies that the way for the Ukraine to win this war is for Britain, other European countries, and in particular the US, to up its game in terms of the provision of weaponry to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians had a very good year at the end of last year. They made some significant gains, but as we've seen recently, the Russians have still got enormous resources, certainly in terms of manpower that they can draw on, and remain a threat. And to keep the Russians at bay, what the Ukrainians really need is heavy armor. So our 14 tanks hopefully will encourage other nations to provide similar equipment so that the Ukrainians have the firepower they need and the weaponry they need to carry on their offensive. And in that context, the one country that really can make a material difference is America, which is already doing quite a bit, but it can do more. And I think Cleverly's trip to Washington is aimed basically to, we've made this gesture. Given the size of the British Armed Forces, it's about all we can do. I think the head of the British Army has already warned that we are seriously depleting our stocks of weapons by giving these tanks. That's the situation we're in. The Americans can do a lot more. They've given 50 of their Bradley light armoured vehicles, which are tank busters and will be very useful, but they can do a lot more.
Con, tell me this, in the immediate aftermath of the war, every time we saw President Zelensky, he was appealing to the West to help them make the skies safe over Ukraine, and we were repeatedly told that we couldn't supply that armament because it would be seen as a provocation by Russia, that it could trigger World War III, that we would be in a nuclear war overnight. Why is that not the case with the provision of tanks?
Well, it's a very good question, Isabel. I mean, I think for the early months of the war, the Western powers, the key members of the NATO alliance, were very worried about escalation, particularly when Putin was going on about using nuclear weapons, etc. Of course, it was a bluff, as I said at the time, that was never going to happen. And I think we've gradually woken up to the fact that a lot of what Putin has said has been bluster to try and conceal the fact he's had a very bad war, he's in a very difficult domestic situation, and he's running out of options, which means that now is the time to really push forward and inflict an enormous defeat on Russia, which will have enormous geopolitical consequences further forward. So within that context, we did eventually get serious missiles into Ukraine from the summer last year, which have completely changed the nature of the conflict in Ukraine's favour. And similarly, if we put in heavy armour like tanks and armoured vehicles, artillery units, etc., then we can help the Ukrainians sustain the momentum. And I don't think there's much that Putin can do about that.
Con Clarkson, appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Con is the Defence and Foreign Affairs editor at the Daily Telegraph, and the Foreign Secretary is in Washington trying to get America to give more commitment to Ukraine.
Yeah, we'll be taking you through the papers in just a moment with Norman Baker and Claire Pearsall. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. My favourite part of the programme is when we delve inside. Well, that too. It's not quite the end. It's when we delve into the papers, look at what's making the print papers. We're going through those with Liberal Democrat Minister, Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker and former Conservative advisor and current councillor Claire Pearcell. Right, I'll put my teeth in. And we will start with you, Norman. You want to talk about the front of the FT this morning. Billions in tax uncollected as officers shift to Brexit and COVID loan fraud.
Yes, this is a Lib Dem revelation come out here, and what they've discovered is that because of new loopholes opening up because of COVID and because of Brexit, the firefighting teams in the tax arrangements have been sent over to deal with those loopholes, and then they've neglected what they would normally do. So billions going uncollected. But, you know, when the public finances are in a poor state and we're all being asked to pay more and everything else, it's a bit rough to see billions uncollected, I guess.
Yeah, but is that because the system is so complicated?
It's very complicated.
Yeah.
The more complicated the system is, the more loopholes will arise. Yeah.
The thing is, though, no one has any sympathy for anybody who the revenue goes after, I suppose. But they're not always right, Norman, and they have this seem to be boundless power to challenge anyone they want. I mean, you'll see lots of people talking about the stresses and strains when they thought they were doing the right thing, or when they were advised
taking advice,
taking their own lives.
Yeah.
People doing this as well.
I think what I don't like is they're very hard on small people and small businesses. But if you're a rich person owing a lot, you'll come to a deal with them and pay it off, and nothing else will happen.
And when you're saying owing a lot, you're talking about millions.
Millions.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Should we talk about Rwanda, Claire? Because it's really interesting to see now the decision that went in the government's favour on all of this can now be appealed, and it's in the Express today.
That's right. There was an appeal put forward at the High Court, and it has now been allowed that charities and individual claimants can take this to the Court of Appeal to have a look at the policy again. I think this is now pushing it further along into the long grass, which a lot of us said at the time that this particular policy wasn't going to work. I just think it's interesting that the courts have decided that this challenge against their own decision can be taken. And you can see that it's going to go to the Court of Appeal. I should imagine it will end up in the Supreme Court. And if there is no election and government's change, then it will end up in probably the European Court. So it really is a doomed policy, and the government is so wedded to it.
Doomed policy.
Doomed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Norman was saying earlier on there are two types of Home Secretary, an authoritarian or a libertarian Home Secretary, and Claire's saying this is a policy that is authoritarian and is doomed.
Yes, I mean, whatever you think about the problems in the Channel, this doesn't work. It doesn't work for a number of reasons, not least of all, there's a small limit in the number of people Rwanda is prepared to take. I think it's 200 or something really quite small. So, I mean, under those circumstances, this is no sort of solution at all.
Well, you can't say it doesn't work, because we haven't tried it yet.
Well, it's not working so far, is it?
It's not working yet.
Yeah, but also, I think, again, it's something that would, that seems to have public support, as it were.
There's public support for trying to deal with people coming across the Channel. And the reason people are coming across the Channel, by the way, is because we've been successful in shutting down people getting onto trains through Eurostar and getting into lorries through Dover. That's why they've all migrated to the Channel. So, you know, if you look at the number of them going across the Channel, of course it's gone up, but you have to look at that in conjunction with the numbers that have gone down at Dover and other ports.
I'm assuming that a lot of the legal challenge to this will be about Rwanda and the rights and the humanitarian issues there.
Yes.
And we heard so much, haven't we, about Suella Braverman saying it was her dream to see one of these flights take off. But not so long ago, they'd started investigating other countries with better human rights records. I think it was Patagonia off the top of my head, or Ecuador, or something like that.
Yeah,
South American countries.
It was South American
so could they focus on those instead?
Absolutely, and they should. I mean, I think the problem is...
So it could work if it was a different country. The policy could work.
Absolutely could. But at the moment, the government is saying that this is going to be used as a deterrent. OK, well, it's not really being much of a deterrent currently. I just wonder if they'd actually sat and thought about it and not put this policy out on the hoof, which they did last year, to great aplomb before a set of local elections without thinking it through. And this is the one thing that always worries me with policy. You don't think it through, you put it out there, it is then either amended or it is challenged in the courts, and it never happens. And it makes the government look weak if they are ever going to suggest another scheme, which could work and could have the desired effect. Everyone is going to look at it and say, well, you didn't do very well on that one, why should we believe you? Trust in politics then is lost.
Would you object to it if it went to a country with a better human rights record? Could it work as a deterrent in that
I think we should take responsibility for people who arrive in this country without trying to offload them onto some other country, actually.
OK. Norman, you've written a book or two in your time. Boris Johnson, this is in the Mirror, and you're saying on page 11...
I sold quite well, my books, but I didn't get the sort of advance that Boris is getting.
6 million quid, I read.
6 million quid. But also, you know, David Cameron got, I think, was at $1.5 million for a memoir no one's read. And Tony Blair got...
a copy of it.
Tony Blair got... Have you read it?
I didn't finish it.
Too boring. And Tony Blair got 800,000, I think it was, for his memoirs. I mean,
that's inflation, isn't it?
Well, it's just inflation, but the thing is that how many books do you have to sell to pay back that advance? You know, but with due respect to Boris Johnson, you know, he's not Prince Harry. He's never going to sell that number of books. The publisher will never get that money back.
What do you think they should call his book? Because there's lots of jokes doing the round yesterday, because as yet untitled, but, you know, sort of suggestions about hasta la vista, baby, or...
I was going to say, sort of ambushed by writing. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a journalist in that respect, but it does feel a little bit like Prince Harry's put his book out and Boris Johnson has turned around and said, hold my beer, here comes mine. I think you can see that kind of play in the press. People will read it. People will buy it.
They will.
I'm not sure that we can take any more of him, really.
Well, quite so. And I think when it does come out, it needs to be in the fiction section.
Norman, a quick word, story in the Star. This is page 2 in the Star. They used to call them in Coronation Street a mural. It's a mural of the King.
Well, I was going to say the King, but I was going to actually show you, if your readers can see this, I don't know if they can or not, who is this man? Because this doesn't look anything like King Charles, to my mind. It looks like some sort of Wallace and Gromit character. How can that be Prince...
We've got a picture of this, have we?
King Charles.
Yeah.
There we go.
That is not King... I'm sorry, that's not King Charles.
Well, it's a bit of a sort of ruddy-faced sort of caricature of him, but...
It's appeared on the street in Northampton.
Oh, it's an act of love. Or is it not? Maybe.
I think it's a council-inspired. I saw it in its full glory. It's quite a big mural.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but the thing is, the council's paid for it, right? And they paid 70,000 quid on this, and apparently the council skint.
Yeah, the council went bankrupt. They were taken to special measures.
Yeah. And his eyes are filled with tears. I wonder if that's after his sons have been fighting.
No, it's because he's got a preview of what that looked like. Claire, we're going to go to a story now of animal cruelty, horrendous perversion of someone who's shooting cats. You have a couple of cats. You've got Shadow and Tango.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, they're very, very much loved. See, there's Tango.
I see what you did there.
Tango being sort of orange, yeah.
Yeah, the orange cat, and sitting on the table.
Is Shadow going to be black?
Supposed to be. Shadow, yes. Surprisingly, he is black.
Oh, look. Oh,
and he's
one
just
eye.
Got one. He has. He lost his eye about 18 months ago, but he is the kindest, sweetest part of our family. And I think that's what is so awful about these crimes, is that those are very much loved parts of my family, both my husband and my son, and to have anybody think of doing something like shooting a pet, any pet,
this is in Haywards Heath in West Sussex. 4 cats shot by an air gun in the same neighbourhood. The police mystified as to what this is all about. Our South East of England reporter Ray Addison will bring you the story right now.
A typical suburban street in Haywards Heath, West Sussex. But somewhere close there lurks what residents are calling a heartless shooter, an unknown attacker taking potshots at harmless cats. The latest victim lives here at number 8.
I know, but cuddles are nice, aren't they?
Frank was adopted just 2 months ago by Gemma and her partner Adam. But on New Year's Day, they found that he'd been shot with an air gun, the pellet entering his abdomen.
He had been out and about a little bit and he came inside and he had this really bad limp, like really, really bad limp. And then we found this wound on him. We just panicked, had to get straight onto the emergency vet. And that's where they discovered that he had in fact been shot.
The damage it caused was extensive, and the vet's bill came to just under £5,000.
He had to have blood transfusions and major surgery. It was horrible seeing this happen to him. It was heartbreaking.
But it's not the first attack. Just 2 doors down at Dan's house, 2 defenceless kittens were targeted, and this time it proved fatal.
I bought Fred and Dusty as a surprise birthday present for Donna, my wife, and obviously our 3 boys. Fred was unfortunately shot back in October of 2021. He was nursed back to health, and then he was unfortunately shot again. This time, unfortunately, the damage to his insides was way too much. So he unfortunately had to be put down.
Now, all of these attacks were reported to the police, but when we contacted them for a statement, they told us that they don't believe they're linked, which residents say is surprising.
It's definitely linked. I think it's mad they're not.
It doesn't take a genius to work out that it must be linked.
The charity Cats Protection says attacks like these are all too common in England and Wales, where air guns are unlicensed and cats are frequently the target.
We see around 100 media stories every year about cats being attacked with air guns, but that's likely to be just the tip of the iceberg. We've already seen licensing for air weapons introduced in Scotland and Northern Ireland. At the moment, around 90% of the press stories we see about cats being attacked with air weapons are in England and Wales, which kind of indicates that there is a problem and that this really needs to be addressed by the government.
It could easily happen again, and we really don't know what we're going to do about him when he's allowed out.
If licensing does go ahead, Cats Protection believe that would give local police a better chance of tracking down the perpetrators of vicious attacks. Until then, residents may have no option but to keep their cats indoors. That or let them walk the streets, knowing there's a hunter on the prowl. Ray Addison, GB News.
Who could do that?
Well, you know, animals give you such love and devotion generally, and you know, people who sadists really.
Well, there is a known link between people who are violent to animals and people who go on to commit domestic violence and all sorts of horrible other crimes. So you are a wrong one, I think, if you're going after a sweet, fluffy, 4-legged cat.
But you know why some people say you get a dog that looks like you, begin to look like your dog.
Yeah.
Isabel was saying there are features or characteristics. Are you really a cat person?
I think I am a human cat.
A human cat,
yeah.
right. And what are the
Well, the characteristics are apparently naps all the time. It's part of the job. I have to try a nap. Needs to be loved. I'm extremely needy. Done with everyone's nonsense. Yep, I'm always fed up with everyone's nonsense. Always want snacks. Yep, that's me. Moody, can be. Cute, but will fight. I've got claws. I am a human cat, and my husband confirmed this.
Meow. Anyway, we're going to take a break. We're back right after this. Hope you can join us.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB plus radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Metropolitan Police is plunged into crisis as an armed officer is revealed to be one of the country's worst serial rapists.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock, Tuesday the 17th of January. You're very welcome. This is Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Metropolitan Police is facing calls for urgent reform after one of its officers pleaded guilty to committing over 70 sex attacks over 18 years, including 24 rapes.
Teachers will strike in England and Wales from the 1st of February, the National Education Union has announced. The walkouts will mean that GCSE pupils will have had just 1 year of uninterrupted learning. The Education Secretary told us this morning our children have been let down by teaching unions.
Still one union who is now putting our children's education and recovery after the pandemic at risk, and it's really disappointing.
The Prime Minister has blocked Scotland's controversial gender recognition bill, with First Minister Nicola Sturgeon calling it a full frontal attack on the Scottish Parliament. The move by the government represents the first time Scottish legislation has been stopped by Westminster.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have accused the broadcaster Jeremy Clarkson of hate rhetoric. It comes after the TV personality issued a second public apology for a column he wrote in the Sun newspaper about hating Meghan Markle.
So to our top story this morning, the Metropolitan Police is facing calls for urgent reform after an officer was revealed to be one of Britain's most prolific sex offenders.
He was PC David Carrick. He pleaded guilty to 71 sex crimes. Those were 24 counts of rape included in that when he appeared at Southwark Crown Court in London yesterday.
Well, the Met Commissioner, Mark Rowley, has apologised to the victims and he's vowed to take action to root out sexual abuse within the force.
Now, earlier on the programme, Norman Brennan. Norman is a retired police officer and spokesperson. He called the case abhorrent and he said more reform was needed within the police as regards selection.
The thing about police officers that commit these types of crimes are they are very good at hiding them. And when you're good at hiding them, it's pretty much like when you're recruited as a police officer, you may be an exemplary character, yet 5 or 10 years down the road, you turn rogue. We've got to look at recruiting, we've got to look at vetting, and we've got to make sure that supervisors and senior officers within the police have got a grip on frontline officers.
But women's rights activist Patsy Stevenson said that reform is not enough.
I used to trust the police. You know, women want to be able to trust police because who are we supposed to go to? But time and time again, they're showing us that we can't trust them. And saying sorry, but not changing the behaviour, the apology just feels absolutely like there's no point in it. There's no point in apologising if you're not going to change what's happening.
Well, our national reporter Paul Hawkins is in southwest London as a misconduct hearing takes place.
The misconduct hearing will be a formality. It's part of the Met's disciplinary process, which has been sped up once they uncovered the scale of David Carrick's offending. But the big question is how the Met and 3 other police forces could have missed David Carrick's offending, how they were unable or failed to join up the dots, given his name cropped up in 9 incidents over a 21-year period, including allegations of rape. Twice he passed police vetting, first when he joined the force in 2001, even though there were allegations including burglary mentioning his name before that, and then in 2017 when he passed vetting as part of joining the Met's Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command. In 2019 he was accused of grabbing a woman by the neck, and then in 2021 an allegation of rape was made against him, and he was still allowed to continue by the Met, although carrying out restricted duties. Now, that rape allegation was withdrawn, but another allegation of rape was made, and then he was subsequently charged, and then the scale of his offending, when other women came forward, became clear. Now, at the same time, during that summer in 2021, following the death of Sarah Everard, the Met was attempting to reassure women that it had a grip on women's safety, that it would double down in their commitment to keep women safe. And at the same time, by its own admission, the Met's own professional standards unit failed to look into the background of David Carrick. So that is why the Met has a big problem at the moment with reassuring women that they can be trusted to keep them safe. The Met Police Commissioner Mark Rowley says, "We have failed. I'm sorry. He should not have been a police officer." He's vowed to reform the Met at speed. And at the moment, Operation Onyx is underway, investigating all of the 45,000 staff and officers who were employed by the Met. We know 800 officers are being investigated over 1,000 offences, including sexual and domestic violence. Mark Rowley saying that he understands that many of those cases will simply be neighbours that overheard an argument between members of staff and officers and their partners, but that there will be hundreds of officers who are uncovered and their backgrounds will be reinvestigated, and that they will have to leave the Met. So certainly David Carrick is not the end of this story. We are expecting to hear more unpleasant, at best, stories, maybe not on the scale and the severity of the offending that we saw from David Carrick, but there will be more unpleasant episodes to come from the Met as they dig into their employees' past, reinvestigate their employees' past, and try to reassure the public and indeed the Met that they can be trusted to keep the capital safe.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. We want to talk now about what makes someone carry out that sort of abuse, those sort of horrific crimes. And we've got Professor of Psychology at Durham University, and that's Dr. Graham Towell. Dr. Towell, good morning to you. What we're trying to do here is to get inside the mind of this monster, David Carrick, and why he would have been drawn. Did his job give him cover? Did it give him protection on this? Did it empower him? What do you think about what you've heard about Carrick and what he was able to do over 20 years?
Well, I think what we know about sex offenders in general is that the power inequality can be quite key, and power can be one of the motivations for sexual offending. And as you mentioned, he has power as a police officer, trusted public sector worker, and so on. And so he clearly misused that power and very seriously. So that's what I would say. I would say that it's about power inequalities and his misuse of that power. So for example, the Metropolitan Police could do various things to improve that situation, employing more women. I know there has been some progress there, but I think it has one of the lower levels percentages of women employed as police officers. Having women in the room as well as men in the room, I think, is important. And I think a greater transparency of the culture. It seems to me that we only hear of of what the Met are doing when something goes wrong. I think there should be far more regular updates about what's happening and what the Met are doing to address this area. But it's not just the Met. There are problems in the military. There are problems in medicine. There are problems across organisations, and of course, we've had problems at universities too that we've sought to address, and partly we've sought to address that through greater transparency, encouraging greater reporting, so people know that they can come forward. And that's important, because if individuals know that they can come forward, that's a message that's sent to would-be perpetrators that actually people will come forward and report, and often they feel safe in the knowledge that they won't, as in this case, for example. So that could maybe deter some of the perpetrators, but also provide the support needed for those people who are the victim survivors of these awful attacks.
So it's fascinating what you say, and that we're not just limiting this, from what you say, to macho jobs, being a firefighter, being a police officer or whatever. What you're saying is right across the board, whether you're a doctor or whatever, no matter what you do for a living, and indeed even in a marriage, even in a partnership with someone, psychological profiling, vetting, understanding who you're dealing with in the recruitment process, obviously has got to be looked at, and obviously is very, very important.
Yeah, well, I think the recruitment is important, but also I think there's something about the culture once someone is recruited. It's about things like bystander intervention. It's about colleagues having the confidence to challenge individuals. So, for example, where people get various nicknames associated with them, which is associated with their behaviour, and I think that was the case here. Well, then I think we need to look at why would that be the case? Why would it be the case that someone would have a particular nickname? That doesn't come out of nowhere.
But Graham, getting back to the power, I understand the nickname, and I forget what his nickname was, but it was something particularly repulsive or abusive. But what is it there? You can't read that out. Why'd you show me that for? No, it was particularly repulsive. What I'm trying to say is this guy and his victims. I mean, we have heard people have come forward to us on social media today and say, why didn't these women report him? Why didn't they report him? But he held all the cards. He was in charge. But I also, just tell me about a man, and what we're reading, and this is all public knowledge here, what he liked to do with the people he dated and the people he controlled was depreciate them. He urinated on them. He made them clean his home naked. He treated them like slaves. And I know people are saying, but why didn't they just report? Why didn't they just pick up the phone? Why didn't they go elsewhere and blow the whistle on him? Why didn't they?
Well, we know about sexual offending, that it's underreported, and it's underreported, across society. I mean, report rates, the ONS data would say report rates for women are about 16%, of those people who've been subjected to some sort of sexual offence. So we know that's the norm. And, coming back to my earlier point about transparency, I think one of the things that can put people off is they don't think anything will be done. They don't think there'll be any change. They don't think they'll be believed. So there's I think the Met have got a real job on here to encourage reporting, to very actively encourage reporting. Because it's only by doing that we're going to give people the confidence, I think, that they can come forwards and that they will be taken seriously. So I think that's one of the more general changes that could be made. But this is, this sounds, an especially unpleasant case in terms of, serial rapist and so on. And from what you described there, they may well have been frightened, if not terrified, of this man and his power. And he clearly seemed a very manipulative individual.
We've got to leave it there. Thank you for your insight, and thank you for explaining, helping us to understand the mind of this monster, David Carrick. We've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Toll is a psychologist. We've got some breaking news that Isabel just wants to bring you up to date with.
Breaking news has just come in to us from Avon and Somerset Police of a major incident that's taking place at the moment in Somerset. We're told this has happened on the A39 Quantock Road in Bridgewater, where a double-decker bus has overturned. Now, I'm seeing local reports that this was a bus carrying 80 people who were workers from the Hinkley Point nuclear site, which is some 30 minutes away by road. And also local reports saying there have been witnesses of 15 ambulances heading to the scene. Now, Avon and Somerset Police put out a tweet saying that there are extremely icy conditions overnight. The freezing conditions combined with the residual water from the recent wet weather over the last week has made it extremely dangerous. And as part of this major incident, roads in the area have been closed. But that is the breaking news. A double-decker bus believed to be carrying 80 people has overturned and a major incident has been declared.
The time, nearly 14 minutes past 9. Teachers are going to strike in England and Wales from the 1st of February. The National Education Union has announced the walkouts by this UK's largest education union will mean that GCSE pupils will have had just 1 year of uninterrupted learning.
Well, earlier this morning, the Education Secretary told us that the government wanted to improve conditions for teachers.
Something we really focused on, and you don't need to strike to get my attention to solve any of these issues. Of course, we want to make sure teachers feel supported. We want to do more on workload. We want to do more on flexibility. We want to make their lives more fulfilled and easier.
So retention, but, and valuing.
Striking is not a way to do that.
Right, and the way you're talking there, you seem quite conciliatory. Do you think that there is a solution to this? Do you think that you can sort this pretty quickly?
Well, it's hard when you've got those kind of figures. We have tried to do everything possible to get additional funding to be able to support the independent pay review claims.
So that was the Education Secretary, sorry, a little bit earlier on.
That was, with a road narrowing sign behind her there, which I hope that isn't a bad omen for settling this dispute with the teachers. This is another political story. The government will block Scotland's gender reform bill after it was claimed it would conflict with equality protections right across the UK.
Well, Scotland's First Minister is furious. She called the move a full frontal attack on Scottish Parliament and has promised to stand by her legislation.
Well, let's go now to our Scotland reporter, Toby Maguire. He's outside Holyrood for us this morning, the seat of the Scottish Parliament. So this is going down with the SNP, certainly. I don't know if that is generally amongst people in Scotland, but it's going down like a bucket of sick, basically, isn't it?
Yes, I certainly think what we're seeing here is in a very frosty Edinburgh, I might add, yet somehow not quite as frosty as relations we're expecting to see between Westminster and Holyrood. Alistair Jack, Secretary for Scotland, has obviously blocked this bill yesterday with the never-before-used Section 35. In 25 years since the 1998 Scotland Act. Certainly what you said there about the SNP, it is worth stating that 2/3 of the Scottish Parliament before Christmas voted to pass this bill, and certainly that included from all 5 of Scotland's main political parties, including 2 Tory frontbenchers.
Okay. Thanks for the update, Toby. We've got to leave it there. And we're going to take a break, and coming up after that...
Yeah, Love Island has welcomed its first partially sighted contestant, so we're meeting the blind footballer who says he's pleased to be represented on TV. Stay with us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Did you watch Love Island last night? Return to our screens, the latest series featuring the island's first ever partially blind contestant. I say the island, but it's actually happening in South Africa, so it's not on the island of Mallorca
They're little
as it is in the
world
south.
of their own.
And they are.
Ron Hall is 25 years of age and he is keen to raise awareness of his disability on the screen. And here's how he introduced himself on the programme.
I'm Ron, I'm 25, I'm financial advisor from Essex. Typical Essex boy, but I'm different. I'm blind in one eye. I've always used it to my advantage. Girls always come up to me and say, I love your eyes. I've been single for 4 years now. Settling down so early I thought was a waste. I've definitely been making the most of single life for the last 4 years. I'm a fun guy to be around. I'm the first on the dance floor. There's no doubt about it. Whether I'm sober, whether I'm 1 drink or 10 drinks in, I'm first on the dance floor.
OK, well, let's now talk and get his reaction. Rainbow Bwangi, who is visually impaired as well, and we're going to find out to what degree. Rainbow, thank you very much indeed for joining us. When you heard about Ron Hall, what did you think?
Yeah, hi. So hearing about Ron, it was really great just to hear about the blind world and the partially sighted world getting kind of represented with on TV. Definitely, there's been people doing interviews and people doing shows and documentaries, but with Love Island being such a massive program within society, it's definitely something great to be represented on, which I feel is going to change people's perceptions.
Yeah.
So a positive thing. It's interesting because we were doing a bit of brainstorming before we came on air, trying to think of some other sort of visually impaired role models, and most of them, I have to say, were older. We came up with Andrea Bocelli, we came up with Gordon Brown. Of course, he's got a glass eye from having had a rugby injury. David Blunkett, who's blind. Stevie Wonder. All of them really famous and, have done wonders for the visually impaired, but a bit older. So this guy's making it relevant to the younger generation.
Yeah, 100%. And that's something that I feel greatly kind of just so amazed about, how there's not that many role models within society who's not just blind but disabled. Like I have my role models within society with playing football, which Premier League footballers such as Marcus Rashford, but in the disabled world you don't have that many role models, and it's great to see people coming through like this who's kind of going to be on our screens to kind of have them role models so then we can look up to them.
Well, it's very good for me to see, Rainbow, that you're a red. Just gladdens my heart that you're out there preaching the red gospel.
Second one this morning.
Second one this morning. They're everywhere. Rainbow, but tell me this. You see, already I'm interested in what you do, because I didn't think blind football. I didn't think about this at all. How do you play that game? People are going to say, well, how do you know where the ball is?
Yeah, so blind football is a 5-a-side game played with futsal rules and based around futsal. Kind of the key rules around blind football, the ball's got audible ball bearings inside, so when the ball rolls, it makes a rattle noise. Also, there's someone behind the goal who you're attacking with, so they can give you audio cues and information on where the goal is. There's 3 key parts on the pitch. So you have the defence zone where the goalkeepers can see. You have your manager on the sideline, and you also have the person stood behind the goal. Each person has to say "voy" when they're going towards the ball, so then it kind of alerts the person on the ball that you're coming to tackle them. So yeah, it's that kind of like key information and rules around blind football, but it's no different than normal sighted mainstream football, and that's what we kind of want to get across to people is we're not kind of different in a way. I kind of have a motto within, I don't have a disability, I just have a different ability, and it's kind of that thing of getting into society. Okay, we play blind football, it's a bit different, but we still play football, we still play internationally, we still play it nationally.
Well, it's an inspirational story, and it's absolutely fascinating to see how you do it. And I'm sure lots of people watching and listening to this will take a lot of strength from your story, and also seeing Ron Hall enter Love Island last night. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Rainbow.
I just want to remind people about this incident that's happened in Somerset this morning. We understand Avon and Somerset police were called around 6 o'clock to reports of a double-decker bus having overturned in Bridgewater on the A39 Quantock Road. There has subsequently been a major incident declared, and air ambulances at the scene. Local reports of 15 ambulances also there. We're also told by Avon and Somerset police icy and freezing conditions were caused by the cold, low temperatures and the residual water from the recent wet weather. We also understand from local reports that there were workers from Hinkley Point C on board that double-decker bus, around 80 people involved. The channel will be keeping right across this story for you throughout the course of the day. We'll be back from 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, won't we?
We will. Sad news to end on there. So thank you very much indeed. Have yourselves a good day.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's